Every single day, a staggering number of Russian soldiers become casualties in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. It's a frightening reality. They are thrust into a wartime meat grinder, becoming victims of relentless assaults from drones and mines. For most nations, such overwhelming losses would signal a catastrophic blunder in strategy. However, for Russia, this grim toll appears to be part of a broader, chilling scheme orchestrated by the Kremlin. Recent revelations have laid bare the catastrophic nature of Russian losses. Despite this, Russian officials insist that everything proceeds according to their plan. On October 14, a report by Euromonitor revealed dismal figures from the UK's Ministry of Defence, a shocking 332,000 casualties in just 2025. These statistics, updated through October 12, suggest that Russia is suffering nearly 35,000 losses each month. When combined with earlier figures, the total Russian casualty count skyrockets to 1.118 million since the onset of the large-scale invasion in February 2022. These figures have been corroborated by Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, albeit with a slightly higher estimate at about 1.125 million. A difference of 7,000 soldiers may not seem substantial, but in military terms, it's on par with the entire standing army of Estonia. For the Kremlin, however, such numbers are just statistics. 7,000 lives sacrificed is simply another day at the front, a minute detail in the grand design. The implications are stark. Russia is not merely losing soldiers, it is effectively decimating whole divisions. Any other force facing a death toll of over 1.1 million soldiers would have long since stepped back or sought a ceasefire. But not Russia. This massacre is not seen as a national tragedy, it's written into the playbook. The Ministry of Defense's analysis provides further insight. Their data shows a monthly average of 950 soldiers lost in September, a slight relief compared to August's figures. In fact, September recorded Russia's second lowest casualty rate since April of 2024. But this relief was short-lived. As October rolls on, casualty rates have soared beyond 1,000 per day, echoing the darker days of previous months. It's not just about numbers, the statistics offer insights into Russia's dire state on the battlefield. The casualties aren't just those who have perished but also encompass injuries and captures, muddying the picture of how many soldiers are truly able to continue fighting. To understand the losses fully, we need to examine the grim ratio of the injured and dead. Historically, military conflicts vary widely in their ratios of injuries to deaths. During World War II, certain battles exhibited a dramatic number of injuries compared to deaths. Fast forward to contemporary warfare, it generally favors the wounded, thanks to advancements in medical care. But for Russian forces, the current reality is chillingly dire. Reports suggest that as of mid-October, the ratio stands at 1.3 wounded for every soldier killed. This indicates a critical lack of medical evacuation and support for injured soldiers, leading to deaths that could have been prevented. The situation is alarming, almost half of their daily casualties are fatalities. As the battlefield claims lives at an unprecedented rate, Russia is left scrambling to fill the void, unable to sustain its fighting force. Shockingly, October 14 became a particularly harrowing day, with reported combat encounters leading to the loss of 1,200 Russian troops, alongside significant losses in machinery and infrastructure. Each assault hits not just at the soldiers but at Russia's ability to maintain any form of strategic coherence moving forward. These revelations paint a bleak picture for Russia's military future, especially when juxtaposed against previously optimistic notions of declining casualties. Instead, history is repeating itself. Thousands of soldiers are sent into the fray each day without a viable strategy for victory. The chilling final takeaway is that Russia's military might seem convinced of the effectiveness of its current strategy, despite staggering losses. The unyielding rhetoric celebrates airstrikes while the grave toll mounts daily. How can a nation so blind to its own suffering continue down this path? This chilling narrative reminds us all that war is ruthless, filled with numbers that reflect profound human loss. The question remains, how much longer can Russia sustain this unrelenting cycle of destruction? In the previous segment, we explored the staggering loss of life faced by Russia in its aggressive campaign. The numbers are not just alarming, they tell a grim story of an army decimated. Despite the overwhelming toll, Russian leadership seems undeterred, with reports depicting their ongoing strategies. Now, let's dive deeper into how this relentless cycle of attrition continues to unfold. Imagine a battlefield where the cries of wounded soldiers echo, and the stench of gunpowder hangs heavy in the air. Russia, in its relentless advance, had seen a slight dip in casualties. In September, the average loss dipped to 950 soldiers per day, a surprising glimmer amidst overwhelming despair. Just months earlier, in the spring of 2025, the number surged to nearly 1,300 daily. The reports told of chaos, with April alone witnessing a staggering 36,000 lives lost. Yet, this fleeting reduction in September was merely a mirage, a deceptive period before the storm returned. As October rolled in, the landscape changed dramatically. Russia's casualty figures began to climb again, swiftly surpassing 1,000 daily. The Ministry of Defense made this troubling announcement, revealing that from October 5 to 12, losses surged with alarming regularity. This increase painted a dire picture as the war machine cranked up, leading to a chilling conclusion: Russian forces are suffering their heaviest losses yet. But what do these casualty figures truly represent? The term casualties includes not just the dead but also the wounded and captured, providing only a partial glimpse into the devastating reality on the ground. It's essential to assess the deadly ratio of injured to dead to understand the full scope of Russia's military struggles. Historically, significant conflicts like World War II showcased varying ratios. The Soviet Army's engagement at Kursk saw 2.29 injuries for each death in its early stages, an impressive figure compared to recent reports. In a striking blow to morale, a recent analysis revealed that contemporary Russian forces face an alarming ratio of just 1.3 wounded per fatality, highlighting a catastrophic lack of medical evacuation and care. As October marched on, the brutal truth became undeniable. With Russia allegedly losing 1,000 soldiers daily, nearly half of those are fatalities. There is no denying it, the Kremlin is sacrificing its troops in a manner reminiscent of a bygone era. Each life lost signifies an irreplaceable blow to its military ambitions and capability. As the echoes of artillery and commands fill the air, Ukraine's forces continue to engage fiercely. Reports from October 14 detailed 190 skirmishes, resulting in a staggering toll on Russian troops. The day alone saw the loss of 1,200 soldiers, alongside the destruction of vital resources such as tanks and artillery systems. Each clash diminishes the command structure of the Russian forces and amplifies disorder, leading to further casualties and chaos. In this dark chapter of military confrontation, the question looms larger: how long can Russia sustain such overwhelming losses without re-evaluating its strategies or objectives? The spiraling figures whisper a chilling truth: a reckoning is inevitable as soldiers rapidly fall in an endless cycle of relentless combat. How long can this tragic saga endure? Every day, Russia pours soldiers into the brutal theater of conflict in Ukraine. The battlefield has become a merciless machine, leaving many to grapple with the grim fate of carnage where drones and artillery deliver devastation. In a typical scenario, such staggering loss would signal a catastrophic failure for any attacking nation. Yet, for Russia, this relentless attrition is woven into the Kremlin's strategy. Recent disclosures revealed a staggering price Russia is paying for its actions. As of October 12, the British Ministry of Defense reported a staggering figure: 332,000 Russian casualties in 2025 alone. This alarming statistic translates to a monthly loss of nearly 35,000 soldiers. Since the February 2022 invasion, the total now exceeds 1.1 million, a figure that would shatter the morale of any ordinary military force. Yet, Russia soldiers on, seemingly unfazed. While the Ministry of Defense indicates a slight decline in losses, recent data paints a different picture. In September 2025, the daily casualty rate hovered around 950, a number that, while lower than previous peaks, signifies ongoing devastation. October has witnessed an alarming uptick, with reports revealing a return to over 1,000 losses per day. The tragic reality is stark: Russia is faced with more than just injury, its forces are being decimated. Understanding the casualty dynamics reveals a harsh truth: Russia's wounded-to-dead ratio is dire. Historically, even during World War II's grueling battles, the Soviet Army maintained a ratio of around 2.29 injuries for every death. In contrast, A recent report indicates a bleak ratio of only 1.3 wounded for every soldier lost, reflecting a critical failure in medical evacuation and care for the injured. This signals a shocking truth. As of October 2025, Russia is suffering losses of around 1,000 soldiers daily, with almost half succumbing to their wounds. Unlike past conflicts with more favorable outcomes for the wounded, Russia finds itself in a state of chaos, exacerbated by an absence of effective medical support. The implications are profound. Every casualty represents a soldier who will never rejoin the ranks, deepening the trenches of despair for the Kremlin. The real tragedy unfolds amid a lack of proper evacuation strategies. Soldiers, many of whom are ill-prepared for the battlefield, are frequently left to fend for themselves after injury. As more are added to the grim tally, it becomes clear that the Kremlin's campaign isn't merely about gaining territory, it's a campaign marked by sacrifice, both in spirit and in flesh. On October 14, reports from the Ukrainian front line unveiled another day of intense combat, with Russia losing over 1,200 troops, tanks, and vital equipment. Each loss chips away at Russia's capability to wage war effectively. The strategy, or lack thereof, seems alarmingly clear. Without infrastructure to support its military, targets and morale crumble under relentless Ukrainian strikes. So why does Russia persist in this nightmarish scenario? What drives the Kremlin to sacrifice its soldiers at such an alarming rate? The answer lurks in the staggering figures and the dark realities of modern warfare. As the fate of brave men and women hangs in the balance, the question remains, can Russia sustain this level of loss, or are these the final throes of a failing strategy? Only time will reveal the truth behind this harrowing chapter in history. Every day in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, thousands of Russian soldiers face devastating losses. A constant stream of these soldiers is sent into battle, and many will never leave the haunting fields where drones and artillery create a living hell. While any other nation might call a halt to such enormous sacrifice, Russia embraces this brutal strategy as part of its overarching plan. Recent data reveals the staggering toll on Russian forces. The UK's Ministry of Defence reported over 332,000 casualties just in 2025 alone, well over 1.1 million since the invasion began in February 2022. That's an unimaginable loss of life, averaging around 35,000 troops every month. Despite these catastrophic figures, the Kremlin continues to assert that their military campaign is unfolding successfully. But are they really succeeding? On October 14, reports highlighted that Russia's average daily losses ranged from 1,000 to 1,200 soldiers during the height of the month. How can a nation endure such relentless turmoil and continue its assault without a plan B? It defies logic, yet for Russia, this harrowing strategy seems to be an intentional play for dominance, built on the backs of its troops. The true depth of these losses becomes apparent when examining the wounded-to-dead ratios. Disturbingly, for every soldier killed, only 1.3 are reported as injured, a figure that highlights a shocking lack of medical support and military care. With insufficient evacuation protocols, many injured soldiers are left behind, ensuring dire shortages in manpower as lives are needlessly sacrificed. On October 14, the conflict escalated sharply. Ukraine reported 190 ground engagements, resulting in 1,200 Russian casualties in just one day. 5 tanks and hundreds of other military assets were also lost. Each decisive blow not only inflicts physical damage but undermines Russia's ability to coordinate and plan future operations. Each command post destroyed leads to chaos, a hallmark of a failed strategy that demands heavy losses. What does this chronic mismanagement mean for the Russian military? With each passing day, as 1,000 soldiers are lost, it becomes clear that Russia's current approach may be a recipe for disaster, rather than the grand design they would have the world believe. They persist in throwing lives into the fray, laying bare an unsettling reality where sheer numbers are prioritized over strategy or care. As we peel back the layers of this unfolding tragedy, the question looms, can Russia continue to sustain such a brutal campaign without inevitable consequences? The clash in Ukraine might just prove to be a grave miscalculation, echoing the whispers of history where victory came not just from numbers but from strategy, preparation, and valor. Each moment in this struggle shapes the narrative. Lives lost will haunt the pages of history in ways we may not yet comprehend. In the face of overwhelming odds, Ukraine has strategically targeted Russian military command centers and logistical hubs, leading to staggering losses for the invaders. Reports indicate that Ukrainian forces struck 7 key areas of personnel and equipment concentration, alongside 3 command posts and 2 artillery units. This deliberate assault not only amplifies Russia's casualties but also undermines its ability to mount effective future operations. The logic is clear: dismantling command structures results in chaotic assaults, and chaos breeds further losses. Shockingly, recent data shows that while Russian forces were estimated to lose about 1,000 soldiers daily in October, on the 14th alone, they suffered a grueling loss of 1,200. This dramatic uptick suggests that the grim reality of their situation is escalating. Just weeks earlier, Russia showed signs of a potential downturn in casualties during August and September, where numbers dipped below 1,000 daily. However, midway through October has revealed a disturbing reversal, with Russian troops once again facing the onslaught of over 1,000 casualties per day, reflecting a brutal reality where strategic adaptations are either ineffectual or non-existent. What is particularly chilling is that Moscow clings to the belief that its initial strategy is sound. On October 10, amidst a massive aerial assault on Ukrainian positions, Russia's Ministry of Defense expressed satisfaction with the outcomes of their strikes, proudly declaring all intended targets had been destroyed. However, this claim stands in stark contrast to the cold reality of the battlefield, where Russia simultaneously lost 1,060 soldiers the very day it celebrated its air assault success. As the echo of jet engines and artillery mingles with the cries of the wounded, it becomes evident that Russia is ensnared in a relentless cycle of violence, seemingly indifferent to the magnitude of its losses. This absence of concern for the staggering casualty rates raises profound questions about the viability of their military strategies and the moral underpinning of their actions. Will Russia persist down this path of devastation, or will the growing toll of war force a re-evaluation of their objectives? As the battlefield rages on, the fate of the soldiers remains entwined in a bitter saga of sacrifice and survival. Every day, Russia is feeding its soldiers into the unforgiving conflict in Ukraine. Despite the staggering losses, the battle continues as if it were all part of a twisted strategy orchestrated by the Kremlin. An article from Euromaidan Press reveals a shocking truth about Russia's massive casualties. 332,000 soldiers have fallen this year alone, leading to a grim total of 1.118 million since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. How can a nation sustain such colossal losses and still march forward? While any other nation would surely falter, Russia seems unperturbed. The losses, which equate to nearly 35,000 soldiers each month, illustrate a disconcerting reality. Instead of escalating caution, the Kremlin's narrative persists: the war is proceeding as intended. Analysis from the UK Ministry of Defence reveals that September saw Russian casualties average 950 per day, a decrease from earlier months. Yet, this respite would be short-lived, as October began to show an alarming rise back above 1,000 daily casualties. Imagine the cacophony of warfare: the distant thuds of artillery, the whirring of drones, and the cries of soldiers echoing amidst the chaos. As October 14 rolls around, Ukraine reports the loss of 1,200 Russian soldiers in a single day. This catastrophic reality questions the effectiveness of Russia's military strategy. Command posts fall, structured assaults crumble, and each engagement leads to an inevitable increase in faces behind the numbers, faces that will never return home. But what lies behind these staggering figures? A report reveals an appalling realization regarding Russia's wounded-to-dead ratio: for every soldier that dies, only 1.3 are injured. This shocking statistic speaks volumes about the lack of evacuation protocols and support for wounded soldiers. The sheer volume of casualties reveals the brutal cost of the Kremlin's approach, where soldiers are sacrificed in the name of attrition, a strategy deeply rooted in Russian military history. As we delve deeper, the gruesome reality of war unfolds. Not only do we confront Russia's mounting losses on the battlefield, but we also see an army pushed to the brink. Yet, December finds the Kremlin still proclaiming success and adherence to a plan steeped in loss. By sacrificing manpower, the Kremlin believes in weakening Ukraine, but at what cost? The artillery rumbles on, the air fills with smoke, and with every echo of gunfire, another soldier is lost to the machine of conflict. So, what happens next? Will Russia double down on this brutal strategy, sacrificing even more for fleeting victories? Or could this relentless tide of casualties force a reckoning, compelling the Kremlin to reassess its approach as victory slips further from its grasp? The reality is grim, and one question looms large: can any plan built on the back of mass death ever lead to a true victory? Continuing from the grim reality of Russia's staggering losses, with over 1 million soldiers dead or injured since the invasion began, we now see how this bloodshed is no accident. It's the Kremlin's ruthless strategy. Crackling gunfire echoes across blood-soaked fields. Have you ever wondered why Russia shrugs off a daily slaughter of 1,000 soldiers? It's not just about destroying Ukraine's defenses, it's about draining their resources with sheer, unrelenting bodies. Imagine the coppery scent of blood mingling with gunpowder smoke, the earth quaking under relentless bombardments. Russia's warriors fall, but not in vain for the Kremlin. They force Ukraine to waste bullets and lives, creeping ever deeper through attrition alone. How does this compare to history's darkest pages? Shorten sentences, pause. Reflect on World War I, where Russian Tsars hurled millions into battle against empires fading. Today's grim truth? Numbers crush spirits, just like back then. Building on that historical echo of mass mobilization, where raw manpower overpowered foes, Russia's current tactics mirror a dark legacy. But wait, is this victory through death, or a twisted tradition doomed to fail? Fumes from artillery sting the nostrils, the cold ground slick with mud and sacrifice. Do modern wars demand mercy, yet Russia discards it? Witness the Battle of Kursk in World War II, under Stalin's iron grip. Russia bled 800,000, Germany 200,000, yet Kursk became a celebrated triumph for the Soviets. For any nation, such carnage erodes strength, inviting invasion. But for Russia? Its strategy engraved in blood. Picture the screams of abandonment, soldiers left to rot without evacuation, their fates sealed. Ukraine exposes the same brutality, offense fueled by endless recruits, like defense before it. Expanding on Russia's brutal ratio of dead to wounded, far worse than even Kursk, where survival chances plummet, and forces erode irreparably. Why humiliate tactics that claim lives pointlessly? Twist: this isn't just warfare, it's a time warp, ignoring medicine and care. Steam rises from wrecked vehicles, the acrid bite of explosives in the air. In June, journalist David Blair from The Telegraph laid it bare with striking data. 250,000 Russians dead among 950,000 casualties after 3 years. Toss that against America's 58,220 losses in 8 Vietnam years. Outdated? Shocking. Visualize Putin as a dark blacksmith, forging armies only to feed them to flames repeatedly. Blair's words ring true: cycle of creation and cremation. Global firepower ranks Estonia's army at 7,700, yet Kremlin dismisses such figures, treating deaths like dust. Diving deeper into that humiliating disparity, where historical wars pale against today's slopes, revealing Putin's frozen mindset. Cliffhanger: but what if this endless pouring of lives cracks the plan itself? Stay tuned. Every day, the conflict in Ukraine unfolds like a nightmarish reality show, showcasing Russia's relentless military onslaught. Picture this: thousands of soldiers caught in a continuous cycle of bloodshed, where their lives are all but tossed into an unforgiving meat grinder. Despite staggering losses, the Kremlin remains steadfast, proclaiming that everything is proceeding according to their strategic blueprint. Recent reports, particularly one from October 14, reveal a chilling statistic from the UK's Ministry of Defence: Russia has suffered an unimaginable 332,000 casualties in just the first 10 months of 2025 alone. This staggering figure translates to almost 35,000 soldiers lost each month, adding to a grotesque total of over 1.1 million casualties since the onset of the invasion in February 2022. Can any military withstand such attrition? Yet, Russia pushes on, seemingly undeterred. What lies behind this grim facade? The Russian military's casualty figures reveal a dismal state of affairs. On October 12, the average loss reached about 950 soldiers per day, a number that is frighteningly escalating again. Reports indicate that as October rolled on, the daily death toll surged past 1,000, echoing the grim realities that haunt the battlefield. But it's not just about numbers. The grim reporting hints at a horrifying trend, a mere 1.3 wounded soldiers for every death. This statistic underscores a chilling truth about the condition of wounded soldiers who are languishing on the battlefield, often forgotten in the chaos of war. Without proper evacuation tactics, many are left to succumb to injuries that could have been treated under better circumstances. Can you imagine the harrowing desperation felt amidst the cries of the fallen? The battlefield is an unforgiving arena, steeped in despair and sacrifice. This echoes back to World War II, where the Soviet Union fought bitterly during battles like Kursk. Yet, here we are, witnessing an even more astonishingly poor ratio of wounded to killed in action. The disarray in Russia's military strategy showcases a fatal adherence to outdated methods. The Great Patriotic War seems to be the frame of reference, ignoring the lessons learned from more contemporary conflicts. The indifference with which Putin regards the loss of life begs a disconcerting question: why persist with this archaic methodology? Even as Russian forces claim minor territorial gains, about 1,930 square miles, or 1% of Ukraine since the beginning of the year, the question looms larger. Is this tiny increment worth the sacrifice of countless lives? While Putin may boast about holding nearly 20% of Ukraine, the struggle is mounting and the grimmer reality of these victories looms ever larger. As Ukrainian defenses continue to inflict heavy losses on Russian troops, 1,200 soldiers in a single skirmish, the looming shadow of a crumbling structure hangs overhead. Each command post taken down makes the next assault even more chaotic, leading to the bitter truth: soldiers are not returning home, and that reality deepens the chasm of desperation in Russia's military ranks. Does this relentless commitment to a flawed plan truly reflect strength? Or does it mirror a deep-seated desperation? What unfolds next in this gripping narrative might just redefine the meaning of victory and loss on the brutal fields of Eastern Europe. The eerie sirens of conflict continue to resonate, as Russia finds itself ensnared in a web of its own making. Will the Kremlin's reckless strategy lead to total collapse, or is there a hidden resilience awaiting revelation? The battlefield waits in hushed anticipation. In the heart of conflict-torn Ukraine, an alarming truth emerges: the daily toll on Russian soldiers is staggering. For every day that passes, hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers are sent to their doom in a relentless war. These warriors, eventually chewed up and spit out by the chaotic battlefield filled with drones and mines, never stand a chance against the onslaught. For an invading force, such losses would typically signal a catastrophic strategy. Yet for the Kremlin, it's merely part of a calculated war plan. Recent revelations paint a grim picture of Russia's situation in this fight. Reports from the UK Ministry of Defence reveal a shocking figure: more than 332,000 casualties in just the first 3 quarters of the year. To put this into perspective, that's nearly 35,000 soldiers lost each month, a staggering rate that should send shockwaves through any military force. Surprisingly, the Kremlin claims everything is unfolding according to their design. This troubling trend leads us to a shocking reality. Russia's total losses since the invasion began in February 2022 have now surpassed 1.1 million. Losses of this magnitude would have forced any other nation to rethink its strategy, perhaps even opting for a ceasefire. But not Russia. Instead of being seen as a national disaster, these casualties are viewed as a necessary sacrifice within Putin's grand scheme. As we delve deeper, we discover that the casualty figures alone do not tell the full story. Turning to the Russian military's alarming ratio of dead to injured paints an even grimmer picture. In years past, armies had ratios of several wounded for every death, thanks to improved medical capabilities. Yet, a recent study revealed that for Russia, that ratio is just 1.3 wounded soldiers for every death. This means that nearly half of their reported casualties are fatalities, soldiers who will never return to the front lines. The ramifications of this reality are dire, with the Kremlin essentially betting on the lives of its soldiers, abandoning them without adequate medical support. But the conflict is far from over. As October 14 unfolds, the situation reaches a new boiling point. On this day alone, reports indicate that Ukrainian forces engaged Russian troops in nearly 190 battles, resulting in more devastating losses for Russia: 1,200 soldiers in a single day. This evidence suggests that Russia's staggering casualty count is far from over and is bound to worsen as they struggle to maintain order amid increasing chaos. The essence of Putin's strategy reveals a chilling realization: he may not be seeking to capture all of Ukraine. Instead, his aim seems focused on securing enough territory to enhance his negotiating power in future peace talks. Recent analysis indicates that capturing regions like Luhansk and Donetsk is paramount for him, a tactic to freeze the front lines and facilitate future deals. As more lives are expended in this endless fight, the question looms: how far will Russia go to achieve this twisted vision? What lies ahead for Russia is uncertain. With mounting losses and dwindling resources, the curtain is lifting on a potential collapse of Putin's ambitions. The paradox remains: in his pursuit to secure Russia's future, he may very well be sowing the seeds of its destruction. As the battlefield echoes with the sounds of conflict, one can only wonder how much longer this ruthless plan can endure. Russia's twisted strategy risks unraveling itself, a shocking twist even analysts couldn't see coming. In April, George Barros from the Institute for the Study of War spoke to the New York Post. He warned that Russia's staggering losses, paired with the massive funds poured into troops, can't sustain forever. That system for churning out fighters held up for 2.5 years. But now, it's crumbling. Can the Kremlin dodge the bullet of economic ruin? Barros said Russia faces the iron grip of economics. Scarce resources choke its efforts. No endless pool of manpower exists. One ISW report predicts major economic woes from the high carnage rate. They'll peak in 12 to 18 months. That's by the end of 2026. Russia's so-called plan has a ticking clock. Doc Brown didn't need roads in Back to the Future. But Russia does for its assaults on Ukraine. Without them, mechanized units can't unleash full power on Pokrovsk. Capturing that key hub grows tougher. Ukraine knows the roads' value. They've turned them into lethal gauntlets. Can you smell the acrid smoke of burning vehicles? Hear the distant hum of drones over blood-soaked earth? Feel the trembling ground from explosions that echo forever? Russia's army in Pokrovsk is getting shredded on Ukraine's roads of death. No survivor escapes that perilous ride. Ukraine has labeled the journey a suicide mission. Euromaidan Press reported this on October 14. They say Ukraine has escalated roads of death tactics near Pokrovsk. Building on past successes, drone units patrol relentlessly, seeking Russian targets, dispatching them with cold precision. Why humiliate Russia by starving its attacks? Crippling logistics weakens every future push on Pokrovsk. This isn't a head-on fight. It's a masterful slow bleed. Once, that Pokrovsk force numbered 110,000 troops. Their humiliation mounts as each drone strikes home. What unexpected disaster awaits when economics crush the Kremlin? Stay tuned for the reckoning. There, in the shadows, Russia's deadline looms ever closer. Will it shatter before victory, or consume everything in its path? The air thickens with dread. Dust and despair cling to the skin. As casualties climb, Russia's commanders must taste their own bitter defeat. Or will a clever twist save their crumbling empire? Every day, Russia drives its soldiers headlong into the brutal conflict in Ukraine. They are caught in a relentless cycle of loss, with many never emerging from the battlegrounds, where drones and artillery rain death upon them. While one would expect such carnage to signal an undeniable strategic failure, the Kremlin sees it differently. Recent reports reveal staggering losses for Russia, with casualties hitting a heart-wrenching 332,000 in 2025 alone. These figures, corroborated by Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, push Russia's total military deaths since February 2022 to a shocking 1.118 million. How can a nation sustain such losses? It appears their plan relies not on strategy, but on the sheer number of troops, assuming that relentless waves of infantry can prevail. As the year began winding down, the average daily losses rose ominously to over 1,000 soldiers, a grim reminder that the human cost of this invasion is climbing once more. The average daily deaths in recent months had been a slight reprieve at around 950, but that trend is rapidly reversing. With every command post and supply line crippled by Ukraine's strategic precision, Russia finds itself in an increasingly precarious position. Notably, data reveals that Russia's ratio of wounded to killed is abysmally low, just 1.3 injured for every one soldier that dies. This stark reality indicates a catastrophic lack of medical evacuation and care, leading to many deaths that could have been prevented. Captured soldiers have no chance of return, they are permanently lost, compounding the number of replacements needed. As the fighting intensified, on October 14 alone, Ukraine reported a staggering 1,200 Russian soldiers lost in combat, alongside heavy equipment destruction. Command posts were struck, logistics crippled, and the echoes of explosions marked a day of significant loss. But as Russia lauds its air operations, it continues to ignore the rising tide of its casualties, over 1,000 soldiers each day, a sign that the conflict is far from reaching any resolution or end. So, how long can Russia continue to bear these losses? Each day brings new challenges and mounting danger on the battlefield. As we delve deeper into this conflict, it's clear that the tides may soon turn in ways no one anticipates. In a stunning twist, just as Russia hoped to regroup, its strategies falter under the weight of relentless Ukrainian tactics. Trapped in a cycle of outdated methods, can the Kremlin adapt fast enough to survive? Every day, an overwhelming number of soldiers are consumed in the conflict within Ukraine. The horrific reality reveals that while soldiers are lost and their sacrifices seem relentless, the Kremlin's determination remains unyielding. Though many perish on the battlefield, the Russian leadership maintains that this war is progressing precisely as intended. Startling statistics emerged recently. According to the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense, Russian forces sustained an astonishing 332,000 casualties in 2025 alone. This staggering number translates to nearly 35,000 soldiers lost each month. Cumulatively, since the onset of the full-scale invasion in February 2022, Russia's losses tragically soar over 1.1 million. Considering that any other nation facing such devastating numbers would re-evaluate their strategy, Russia, counterintuitively, persists without hesitation. In a closer look at the daily toll, data shared by the Ministry of Defense indicates that September recorded an average loss of 950 soldiers a day, an alarming figure, though it might appear as a moderate decrease from a peak of 1,300 daily. Yet as October progresses, daily losses have once again exceeded 1,000. While Russia seeks to maintain a facade of strength, the stark reality reveals a military in disarray, with countless soldiers lost to circumstances that could have been avoided. To truly understand these grim figures, one must examine the wounded-to-dead ratio. Historically, during World War II, the loss ratio for the Soviet Army during critical battles hovered around 2 injuries for every death. Today, Russia faces a chilling ratio of only 1.3 wounded for each loss. This statistic starkly indicates that the survival of injured soldiers is diminished, leaving the Kremlin to shoulder an ever-increasing burden of casualties. Further compounding the crisis, recent reports indicate that Ukrainian forces have intensified their efforts, resulting in significant additional losses for Russia. On October 14, the Ukrainian military engaged in 190 confrontations, leading to a staggering loss of 1,200 Russian troops in just a single day. Such engagements not only increase casualty figures but also cripple the command infrastructure that is crucial for future operations. The question lingers, can Russia sustain its strategy in the face of such overwhelming losses? As the month progresses, that answer becomes increasingly precarious. On October 10, Russia launched a massive air assault, proclaiming success despite suffering over 1,000 casualties simultaneously, further highlighting a military strategy devoid of realistic adjustments. Now, the battle is not just fought on the ground but also in the sky, where Ukraine's drones have transformed the landscape. When tanks are equipped with makeshift protections against drones, they often become cumbersome and ineffective, as seen in numerous attempts to shield armored vehicles with coped cages. These designs, typically ineffective, illustrate the extent of Russia's desperation. On a vivid battlefield, the air is filled with the echoes of destruction, the incessant thrum of drones, and the rustle of metal against the stark earth as Ukraine continues to dismantle Russian assets, leaving nothing but shattered remains. As the chaos ensues, how will Russia respond to maintain its agenda? The shocking toll continues to rise, and each day brings new horrors, revealing a challenging struggle on every front. The complexities of war transform the landscape into a grim theater, where the cost grows heavier, and the possibility of victory becomes fainter by the hour. In the last part, we witnessed the carnage on Ukraine's dreaded roads of death. Russia's sturdy T-80 tanks, even those rigged with makeshift cages for protection, crumple under relentless drone strikes. Ukrainian operators show no mercy, blasting apart any vehicle in their path, exposing the raw vulnerability of Russia's armored force. But what if I told you Russia's desperation has sunk even lower? Imagine soldiers scavenging for scraps, jamming every conceivable ride into war's vortex, vans bumping over rutted earth, pickup trucks rumbling through mud, motorcycles roaring like frantic insects, even lone riders peddling frantic parcels of ammo. The acrid stench of fuel and dust hangs heavy as engines sputter to life, chased by the distant whir of Ukrainian harbingers. Euromaidan Press reveals this grim reality, where all finds serve the logistical chokehold around Kursk. Supplied vehicles of every stripe, vans, pickups, bikes, are deployed, carrying ammunition or rations in pitiful batches, only to be plucked off like ripe fruit by unseen hunters. This tactic screams the dire straits of Russia's mechanized might. After hemorrhaging over 11,200 tanks in brutal Ukraine offensives during 2023 and 2024, they're forced into war machines never meant for combat. Freelance journalist David Axe spotlighted this in March. He dissected Russia's predicament: more assaults equaled more equipment massacres, birthing a crisis. A February survey tallied civilian vehicles, cars, ATVs, even golf carts, as 70% of losses that month. But the nightmare escalated. Shortages now push civilian transports to unprecedented levels. Russia gambles they can haul goods without gambling prized armor. Yet, this gambit breaks against drone swarm fury, weapons that shred tanks with ease. By May, Axe warned in his Trench Art column, 90% of Russia's monthly hundreds of vehicle destructions are now humble civilians. Can you feel the humiliation crawling up their spines? No cunning stratagem here, just pure, bone-chilling desperation unveiling Russia's hollow core. What eerie twist hides in this vehicle graveyard? Russia's commanders cling to feigned brilliance, but whispers reveal a darker gamble. Picture the battlefield's metallic tang on your tongue, explosions thunder rattling bones, as countless makeshift haulers vanish in flame. Sensory overload hits, exhaust fumes mixing with blood-tinged soil, vibrations from near-miss blasts pushing through your boots. Yet, amid this chaos, a provocative question burns: how does Mother Russia sleep at night, hurling defenseless transports into the blender? You'll be shocked by what comes next, as their illusion of invincibility shatters further. As we peel back layers of Russia's crumbling facade, the vehicle saga deepens into an avalanche of folly. These aren't victories, they're admissions of defeat, where every ripped pickup or flipped bike heralds the endgame. Veteran voices like Axe call it a crisis spiraling since those relentless 2023 to 2024 pushes. Losses multiplied, forcing this bizarre pivot: pack civilian rides with essentials, dodge the big guns. But drones don't discriminate. One whistle in the sky, a shuddering blast, and another link in Russia's chain snaps. By early this year, civilian casualties swelled to 90% of Rex monthly. Can they truly claim this saves tanks, or does it just mask a mortifying truth? Feel the weight of that question pressing down, the smoky haze blurring horizons, the crunch of debris underfoot echoing Russia's embarrassment. But here's the gut-punch twist that flips everything: Russia's brilliant evasion might be their own trap. As casualties mount, with no plan B in sight, are they engineering their own downfall? Stay tuned for the revelation that could humiliate the Kremlin forever. What if every bike blown up seals their fate, not just Ukraine's? The air grows colder with dread, senses on high alert. To grasp the emotional arc, think of proud Soviet legacies eroded, soldiers' dreams fumbling in the fog of makeshift wars. Visuals flood in, helmets fogged with fear, cold sweat trickling down backs as vehicles lurch forward. Are these rides Russia's smart play, or a shameful retreat? Axe's fresh May insights hammer home: no tactical genius here, just a void where armored might should roar. Victim count hits hundreds monthly, mostly everyday cars succumbing to aerial predators. It's a crescendo of failure, each loss a rhetorical stab: would any other army stoop this low? And the cliffhanger looms: amid this degradation, Russia's air of superiority wavers. Unexpectedly, their bold airstrikes hide a sinister cost, tying back to the very bloodshed we explored. How does this all connect? Tune in to uncover the Kremlin's ultimate humiliation, where even skies rain down irony. delving into sensory desolation. The battlefield reeks of burned rubber and gunfire residue, tactile jolts from each new explosion rippling through the air. Rhetorical fire rages. How could once mighty Russia reduce soldiers to delivery boys? Per Axe, 90% of October's hundreds of vehicle losses scream civilian tragedy, a May survey's grim prophecy fulfilled. This surge from February's 70% exposes exponential disaster, assaults breeding outright strip mines of equipment. Yet, the perspective shifts wildly here, their savings tactic doubles as self-sabotage. Picture leaders in opulent bunkers, untouched by the mud's bitter chill or Engine's dying groans. It's no strategy, it's survival theater gone awry. What shocking reversal awaits in their casualty calculus? The horizon darkens with foreboding. Every month, Russia sacrifices countless military vehicles to the unforgiving landscape of the Ukraine conflict. A staggering 90% of these losses are civilian vehicles, depicting a haunting reality. This isn't a savvy maneuver to preserve Russia's armored assets, but a desperate sign of its waning capabilities. As the war drags on into its fourth year, the question looms, how much longer can Russia sustain its military efforts with such dire losses? On a nearly 8.7-mile stretch of the Snegoskt-Zelenishlak highway in Kursk, Ukraine has transformed the terrain into a hunter's paradise, preying upon unsuspecting Russian vehicles. Reports indicate that over 30 units of equipment lay in ruins along this grim pathway. The highway, now a graveyard of wreckage, echoes with the aftermath of relentless assaults, a cruel reminder of the cost of complacency. Switching tactics, Russia has turned to motorcycles, banking on their speed and agility against the ominous drone threats. CNN reported in April that these two-wheeled machines could navigate the battlefield with swiftness, but at what cost? The riders' vulnerability makes them easy targets. Despite their perceived advantage, the reality is stark. Russian soldiers are finding themselves ambushed, the very drones they intended to dodge capturing footage of twisted metal and despair. Each attempt to traverse these treacherous roads of death results in more debris littering the landscape, the remnants of various vehicles strewn across the ground. Drone operators scour the area, picking off any signs of life. Their hunt confirmed by images that reveal scorched earth and smoldering remnants of warfare. Russia's motto should echo, "Why do we never learn?" This tactic isn't new. Ukraine has perfected the art of creating insurmountable obstacles, crippling Russia's advancements. As history echoes back to August 2024, when Ukraine successfully reclaimed substantial territories in Kursk, the Russian counteroffensive revealed its own vulnerabilities. The roads of death re-emerged, keeping deadly secrets that Russian forces failed to heed. In October, reports flooded in depicting devastating strikes against Russian troops, leaving them to grapple with monumental losses. The question remains, are these paths of despair leading to their inevitable defeat, or do they represent a misguided belief in sheer numbers over strategy? In this chaotic mosaic of combat, every day brings new challenges and tumult. As Russia presses on, trying to reclaim its position, the battlefield becomes more unforgiving. Casualties rise, and the remnants of past tactics become evident in the ruins left behind. How will this relentless campaign unfold? Only time will tell if the strategy holds water, or if the streets of death will finally claim their due. Every day, countless Russian soldiers are propelled into the relentless chaos of the Ukraine conflict. Despite their losses, the Kremlin remains adamant that their strategy is unfolding perfectly. But how can any rational observer believe that when, according to UK defense data, Russia's military has sustained a staggering 332,000 casualties just this year alone? Yes, you heard that right. Nearly 35,000 soldiers lost each month in the midst of a brutal clash that has claimed a total of over 1.1 million troops since February 2022. While most nations would retreat or rethink their approach after such significant losses, Russia appears to embrace the sacrifice, viewing it not as a tragedy but as a necessary part of their grand design. The Ministry of Defense suggested a glimmer of hope, a decrease in casualties during September, an average of 950 soldiers per day. Yet, the optimistic outlook was short-lived, as figures from October began to show a troubling resurgence. Casualties rapidly climbed back over 1,000 daily, reminiscent of earlier months when the toll was even more devastating. With each fallen soldier, the real picture of Russia's military struggles emerges. For every death reported, the number of injuries reveals a disturbing trend, only 1.3 wounded for every soldier who dies, pointing to a catastrophic lack of medical support on the battlefield. The grim reality is that many of these lives could have been saved with proper evacuation procedures. The soldiers are not just being injured, they're dying without the chance for recovery. As the situation spirals downward, in the heat of battle, Ukraine escalates its offensive. On a single day, October 14, reports indicated that Russia suffered 1,200 troop losses amidst relentless strikes on strategic positions. Every command center taken out by Ukraine brings chaos to what little organization remains in the Russian forces. How long can Russia sustain this strategy of attrition? The conflict escalates as Ukraine sets out to dismantle Russian military infrastructure, targeting not only personnel but the very systems that enable them to fight. The strategy initiates a cascade effect, resulting in further losses for a military that seems committed to an unsustainable approach. With each day that passes, will the casualties reach a breaking point, forcing a re-evaluation of the Kremlin's plans? Each avoided confrontation, every destroyed vehicle, turns the dial further on a grim narrative that seems to repeat itself with heartbreaking regularity. The question looms, can sheer numbers indeed win a war? Or will this desperation lead to an inevitable collapse under the weight of its own losses? As we navigate through this seemingly endless cycle, the echoes of a battlefield grow louder. What are the costs of such a reckless strategy? The next chapter in this brutal saga unfolds as Russia continues to push forward, but at what price? The tension hangs in the air. Will this relentless pursuit for victory eventually ignite a change? Each day, countless Russian soldiers are sent into the relentless turmoil of the Ukraine conflict, where they face the terrifying onslaught of drones and mines. The loss of life is staggering, with numbers that would signal catastrophic failure for any other nation. Yet, for Russia, these sacrifices appear to align with a chilling strategy devised in the Kremlin. Recent reports unveil shocking statistics from the UK Ministry of Defense, revealing that throughout 2025 alone, Russia has suffered an astonishing 332,000 casualties. This grim figure translates to nearly 35,000 soldiers lost each month as the conflict rages on. Since launching its full-scale invasion in February 2022, the total toll has exceeded 1.1 million Russian soldiers. Would any sane leadership press on under such dire conditions? Not Russia. Instead, the Kremlin remains adamant that everything is proceeding according to plan. September's casualty rates appeared to dip, providing a fleeting glimmer of hope for Russian forces, with losses averaging 950 soldiers per day. However, this brief respite proved illusory, as the momentum shifted once more in October, with daily fatalities exceeding 1,000, suggesting a return to devastating losses. However, casualties don't tell the entire story of Russia's human cost. More frighteningly, recent assessments reveal a deeply concerning wounded-to-dead ratio significantly worse than historical battles like Kursk, exposing a troubling reality. As evacuation strategies fail, countless soldiers succumb to their injuries without timely medical care. A bleak conclusion suggests an alarming 1.3 wounded for every death in October, meaning nearly half of those reported casualties are fatalities. Now, as October unfolds, the situation worsens. Reports indicate that on one day alone, Russia suffered 1,200 troop losses, along with devastating equipment damage in the face of well-orchestrated Ukrainian strikes. They strike not just at soldiers, but also at vital command structures, rendering future assaults disorganized and deadly. It's chilling to witness Russia's lack of alternative strategies. Their grand plan seems to hinge on sheer manpower, forsaking effective tactics for brute force. What drives a nation to pour lives into such a futile endeavor? The answer lies in an entrenched belief in eventual victory, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. In this harrowing environment, one figure stands out in Ukraine's defensive strategy. Commander Robert Brovdy, operating under the call sign Magyar, has emerged as a pivotal leader, orchestrating a formidable drone-centric defense system that has turned once traversable roads into lethal traps for Russian forces. His innovative strategies leverage drone technology to maintain superiority over vast territories, making every mile hazardous for the adversary. The dedication of individuals like Brovdy underscores the adaptability and resilience of Ukraine's military response, providing a formidable counterbalance to the relentless Russian onslaught. As the essence of war evolves, we must grapple with the grim realities faced by soldiers on the front lines. The question looms, how much longer can these tactics sustain this level of brutal sacrifice? Only time will reveal the truth behind Russia's stony disregard for its soldiers and the costs that will echo long after the fighting ceases. Imagine the relentless hum of drones overhead, a soldier's heartbeat pounding in his chest, the sharp crack of mortar fire echoing through the air. In the shadowed corridors of memory, recall a crisp autumn day in 2022, Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine, claiming it would be swift, but instead unleashing a torrent of blood and steel. Now, fast-forwarding through those brutal losses, where over 1.1 million Russian lives have been claimed by this conflict, we're diving into the deadly corridors of Pokrovsk, where Ukraine's defenses turn roads into veritable traps of death. Who could have predicted that Russia's giant of an army, already bleeding from staggering casualties, would be humbled by tiny flying machines and watchful eyes? Picture this shocking scene. Ukrainian experts, led by the brilliant Colonel Yevgen Bulgakov, have transformed the battlefield. His strategy? Layered drone screens and patrolled death zones, casting a net over a dozen kilometers deep behind enemy lines. Every shadow under watch, every wheel that rolls is hunted, every breath of movement met with swift, merciless judgment. The Irpin Post trumpets his doctrine of total aerial supremacy, pushing the gray zone's edges to suffocate supply routes. But can such a cunning plan truly cripple a behemoth? Witness the toll. Ukrainians in Pokrovsk are ecstatic about Bulgakov's presence, and even more thrilled by rumors he'll linger, guarding their stronghold like an unyielding sentinel. Russia's commanders, cornered and rethinking, scramble to adapt. Those infamous paths of doom, Dronegeddon avenues, prove insurmountable, neutralizing the armored juggernauts of old. Tanks lumber into staged attack zones, only to vanish into a swarm of buzzing predators. Motorbikes, once hailed as sneaky saviors against drone barrages, now crumple like paper under aerial hail, their riders' screams swallowed by the roar. Confronted with total roadblock, as the Irpin Post reveals, Russia shrinks its ambitions, dispatching minute squads, just 3 warriors or fewer, sneaking like ghosts into Ukrainian trenches. RBC Ukraine exposed this desperate pivot in early September, noting Marine brigades sent to spearhead a supposed triumph near Pokrovsk. Yet, without armored fist to bolster, such pushes dissolve into nothing. Reports from Ukraine's 7th Army Corps air assault forces peel back Russia's unwelcome assault failures. Mechanized waves are discarded relics now. The foe's sole aim in Pokrovsk? Creep agonizingly close to drone pilots or mortar teams, scatter defenders, and claw out tenuous footholds. Feel the tension mounting, the acrid stench of gunpowder clinging to sweaty uniforms, boots sinking into muddy trenches. How far will Russia stoop to claw back control? And what twisted revelation lurks if those tiny infiltrators succeed in silencing the buzzing swarm? The battle hangs by a thread. Will Ukraine's skies hold, or is a horrifying reversal brewing? $/Omega$. Imagine Russia's colossal war machine grinding to a halt on the blood-soaked fields of Pokrovsk. In the last clip, we uncovered how Moscow has scrapped its mechanized assaults, rendered useless by Ukraine's relentless defenses. Instead, they're scrambling infiltrators to creep dangerously close to our drone operators and mortar crews, plotting to shatter our lines, seize a fresh foothold, and unleash a savage push toward Pokrovsk. This desperate ploy aims to veil their crushing losses in Dobrapilya. Zelensky dropped a bombshell on October 9, exposing Russia's sham deadlines. Originally bragging about victory by September, they've slunk back and fumbled for November, dangling on Putin's infamous promise to conquer. But hold on to your seats. What if Russia's next play wasn't a tactical stroke of genius, but a suicidal gamble that's bleeding them dry under our very noses? Picture the chill fog of dawn in Pokrovsk, where the air reeks of gunpowder and fresh blood, and the ground trembles under the weight of forgotten hopes. Can you hear the frantic whispers of Russian soldiers, their boots sinking into mud thick with the remnants of comrades, as they inch toward positions that could turn the tide? Deepening this nightmare, Russia's infiltrators aren't just probing, they're clawing to expand the gray zone, that chaotic buffer where nightmares unfold. The 7th Army Corps spilled the beans on their Facebook post, revealing how these shadow warriors slip behind our lines, eyes fixed on slaughtering the operators of those buzzing mechanical harbingers of death. Yet, is this cunning recalibration or pure madness? sending flesh-to-battle machines that spit fire from the skies. How does Russia fathom this could tip the scales? Ukraine's eyes are wide open, though. Commander Brovdi isn't playing catch-up, he's orchestrating a ferocious counterstrike, turning drones into vengeful predators. As reports from Euromaidan press flood in, Brovdi has decreed, shift priorities. Now, Ukraine's aerial assassins zero in on Russia's infantry first, before vehicles even cross their minds. Drone operators in Pokrovsk aren't just shooting, they're tasked with monthly kill quotas, churning out casualties faster than Russia can pump in fresh meat for the grinder. The whisper of rotors slicing through air, carrying payloads of retribution, echoes a chilling demand: outkill the mobilization wave flooding into this doomed direction. What if this sparks a riveting game of shadows and countermeasures, where every move uncovers betrayal? In this grisly ballet, Brovdi eyes the infantry as the true monsters lurking at Pokrovsk's gates, while vehicles cower as secondary threats. Russia, scarred by the infamous roads of death, those lethal highways where armored coffins litter the asphalt, has finally grasped their futility. But feel the tension building, a sensory storm of distant artillery booms rattling your bones, the acrid sting of smoke in your nostrils, and the icy sweat of anticipation. How long until Russia deciphers this blood-soaked riddle? Inevitably, they might, unraveling Ukraine's focus on foot soldiers over iron beasts. Then, what? They'll slither back to those cursed roads, resurrecting mechanized nightmares. Brovdi looms. Vigilant sentinel of the skies, ready to unleash drones anew on tanks and trucks the moment Russia's logistical veins pulse with renewed life or assaults brew anew. This isn't static warfare, it's a lethal ping-pong of reactions, each volley stained with screams and steel. Based on the slaughter spread across Pokrovsk, who doubt Ukraine dominates this grim arena? The roads of death throttle Putin's autumn conquest dreams, stranding Russia eons off schedule. Pokrovsk was slated for surrender by summer's end, a boast that's now a crimson mockery. Putin reeks of desperation, as Zelensky rightly warns. And now, as Russia twists anew, what horrifying lengths will they go to revive their crumbling empire? The battlefield simmers with unanswered threats, where one misstep could unleash an avalanche of agony. Stay tuned, the stakes climb higher with every heartbeat. In the fierce landscape of modern warfare, Ukraine stands resilient, thwarting Russia's ambitions in the battle for Pokrovsk. Once hailed as a prime target, this city slipped from Russia's grasp as heavy casualties sliced through their ranks. An urgent urgency now grips the Kremlin as they seek to reclaim lost ground, desperately pushing towards their goal. Yet, with each day, hope dims for the invading forces, revealing a disturbing truth: this costly endeavor may lead to their unraveling. In a statement on October 9, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky highlighted Russia's wavering timelines. While earlier promises aimed for control by September, the deadline has shifted dramatically, illustrating a profound struggle. The swift retreat from Dobropilya underscored the heavy toll Russia has faced. With newfound urgency, they reinforce their numbers, casting more soldiers and equipment into the chaotic fray of Pokrovsk. But the perilous terrain of Ukraine's roads of death lies ahead, mercilessly ready to dismantle another wave of Russian recruits. Remarkably, Putin's strategy seems to dismiss human tolls in favor of sheer numbers. With over 1 million soldiers lost or incapacitated, the notion of sacrifice haunts the battlefield. Yet, the true battle may extend beyond the borders of Ukraine. Internally, Russia grapples with its own Dutch disease, a metaphor for economic malaise and national decay surfacing since its Soviet past. Paul Warburg's recent exposé illuminates how this ailment may be eroding the foundations of a once mighty empire. This desperate condition could prove far more destructive than the ongoing conflict abroad. As resources dwindle and morale falters, there lies a question that echoes loudly: can any military achieve victory while crumbling from within? As the smoke clears, will Russia's ambitions ultimately lead to its own downfall, not by Ukraine's hand, but by the insidious rot of its internal strife? The answers await as this dramatic saga unfolds. With each failed assault, Russia's dreams of dominance appear increasingly unattainable. The weight of lost lives, coupled with the harsh realities of battlefield defeat, is a story begging for resolution. As Ukraine's forces stand defiantly at the gates of Pokrovsk, it's clear: not only is this a fight for territory, but for the very soul of a nation. Will Russia's plans withstand the pressure, or will the internal challenges become insurmountable? The narrative thickens, with the haunting specter of despair looming ever closer. In a land where shadows loom and the weight of war presses heavily upon the heart, Russia's relentless struggle in Ukraine has taken a staggering toll. Each day, its soldiers are thrown into the chaos, consumed by the ceaseless machinery of conflict. Yet the Kremlin's narrative persists: this is all part of a grand strategy. But how could a nation endure such losses without yielding? On October 14, a sobering report from Euromaidan revealed the tragic figures that paint a shocking picture of loss: 332,000 casualties in just a few months of 2025, a staggering total of 1.118 million since the onset of this conflict in February 2022. Imagine 35,000 soldiers lost each month, like entire battalions vanishing into thin air. For any other nation, this would signal defeat, a cry for an end, yet Russia soldiers on, convinced of their strength. As the days roll on, the landscape of battle shifts. Initially, September brought a glimmer of hope, a decrease in casualties to an average of 950 per day. It felt like a fleeting respite amid relentless turbulence. But as October dawned, the ghost of despair returned, with losses climbing back up beyond 1,000 daily. The machine churns on, and with it, what does survival look like for these brave souls? Will they be the last of their kin? Casualties alone only tell part of the tale. Recent analysis reveals a haunting ratio of 1.3 wounded for every soldier not returning home. This indicates an alarming crisis in care. The wounded are left behind, victims of a system failing to adapt. The battlefield becomes a grave where hope is scant, and survival a distant dream. Would these brave men and women have survived with proper resources? As October progresses, reports from the front lines illuminate the harrowing reality. On October 14, another grisly tally: 1,200 soldiers lost in one day alone. The air thickens with the scent of burning metal and gunpowder. Echoes of distant explosions ring in the ears of those still fighting. With every command post struck by Ukraine's forces, the chaos for Russia deepens. How can a military advance when its foundation crumbles? Despite the grim figures, the Kremlin remains adamant: this loss is not failure. Just a day prior, Russian officials celebrated a strategic airstrike while losing another 1,060 men. Are they blind to the consequences, or do they believe their own tale of victory? It's clear, their only plan is to continue pushing forward, feeding lives into the relentless maw of war. What lies ahead in this unfolding saga? As darkness gathers, will Russia reconsider its unyielding path, or will they double down on a strategy soaked in blood and despair? The echoes of war continue, and the battlefield remains unforgiving. The fabric of hope wears thin, and the next move could shift the course of this relentless conflict once more. Every day, Russia sends countless soldiers into a relentless onslaught in Ukraine. The conflict devours lives, turning brave men into nothing more than numbers on a casualty list. Despite facing unimaginable losses, the Kremlin stubbornly claims that everything is proceeding according to their grand plan. Recent data unveils staggering figures. As of October 2025, Russia has suffered a catastrophic 332,000 casualties in this ongoing war. This alarming number translates to almost 35,000 lives per month. Since the beginning of this full-scale invasion back in February 2022, the total loss of Russian lives has soared to over 1.1 million. These figures, corroborated by both the UK's Ministry of Defence and Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, paint a grim picture of Russia's future. Yet, astonishingly, despite facing such losses, there are no signs of retreat or calls for peace. Why does Russia continue on this path, seemingly undeterred by the human cost of its ambitions? In September alone, the average daily loss was around 950 soldiers, a slight decline from earlier months but still alarmingly high. But as October continued, that figure began to creep back up, signaling a return to devastating trends. Warfare can be brutal, and for Russia, it appears to be a downward spiral fueled by relentless command failures and poorly executed strategies. Recording data from October, estimates indicate that on some days, 1,200 soldiers fell to Ukrainian defenses in furious battles across the front lines. With each strike, Ukraine targets not only soldiers but also the infrastructure vital for Russia's military operations. This tactic ensures disarray for Russia, where chaotic attacks lead to relentless losses. How long can the Kremlin maintain this flow of lives lost if they continue to mismanage their forces? As they blindly write off their losses, is there any hope of victory? What's more alarming is the current state of Russian soldiers' survival ratios. A recent analysis reports a dire reality: for every soldier killed, only 1.3 are reported as injured. Ineffective evacuation protocols plague the battlefield. Without support, these injured soldiers succumb to wounds that could have been treated. With the losses exceeding even the dismal figures of historical battles like Kursk, one must wonder, how long before the weight of this tragedy topples the Kremlin's ambitions? As the days tick by, the reality becomes clearer: the Kremlin's plan requires not just soldiers but tens of thousands of lives. The casualties mount, and the spirit of the military weakens under the relentless pressure. On October 14, Russian commanders were faced with yet another grim assessment. Their forces had lost over 1,000 soldiers in a single day amidst escalating Ukrainian resistance. To further complicate matters, Russia's energy sector suffers heavy blows from Ukraine's ongoing strikes, leading to dire conditions at gas stations across the country. Reports indicate that over 220 stations in the southern federal district halted sales completely. This crumbling infrastructure underlines the trouble ahead for Russia, showing a nation on the brink of economic upheaval even as it engages in an unwinnable war. The question remains: can Russia sustain this level of sacrifice? With no fallback strategies and an alarming rate of declining morale, the end of this conflict feels eerily inevitable. How long until the Kremlin's ambition crumbles under the weight of its own losses? As the world watches, one fact stands tall: the clock is ticking for Russia, and each day brings them closer to an uncomfortable reckoning. Is Russia's army crumbling under mountains of bodies, or is this bloodshed their sick victory strategy? Picture the deafening roar of explosions shaking the earth, the acrid stench of gunpowder choking the air, soldiers feeling the icy grip of fear as drones buzz like angry hornets above. Every day, Vladimir Putin's forces feed hundreds into Ukraine's merciless grinder. Can you believe it? Russia's been chewed up by bullets, shredded by mines, their dead piling higher than Berlin's towers in World War II. Yet Kremlin spins it as plan: catastrophic failure or genius deception? We dive into the horror and the twist. But as Ukraine's defenses hold, Russia's flesh-and-blood waves crash futilely against borders. The UK Ministry of Defence revealed catastrophic losses on October 14. By October 12, 2025, Russia suffered a staggering 332,000 casualties alone. Factoring in October as roughly half a month, that's nearly 35,000 soldiers vanishing monthly. These add to prior losses since Putin's February 2022 invasion, totaling a monstrous 1.118 million dead and injured. Why isn't Russia retreating? Any sane nation would call for a ceasefire amidst such slaughter. Instead, Kremlin claims this is on track. What dark calculus lets Putin gamify genocide? Our minds reel, and the truth twists further. Now, rewind that battlefield hell, blood-stained earth, echoing screams of the fallen. Russia bled profusely in spring 2025, losing 36,000 in April alone. But late summer nudged down the death toll. August and September averaged 950 daily losses, a low not seen since April 2024. Yet October reignites the inferno. From the 5th to 12th, Russia surpassed 1,000 casualties daily, more life sucked into Ukraine's vortex. Casualties mean killed, wounded, captured, erased forever. The dead-to-wounded ratio exposes barbarity. In World War II, U.S. forces averaged 5 injured per death. Russia? Today, 1.3 wounded for each dead, Kursk's brutality eclipsed. No evacuation, just abandonment. Half Russia's 1,000 October daily losses are permanent voids. Feel the cold reality? Putin's men die slowly, agonizingly, for an illusion of victory. Ukraine hasn't just fought back, it's dismantled Russia's command like ripping out a wolf's teeth. On October 14, 190 engagements erupted. Russia lost 1,200 soldiers in one blood-soaked day, plus 5 tanks, 29 artillery pieces, 145 vehicles, 390 drones. Strikes pounded personnel hubs and posts, scattering invaders. Disorganized, they bleed more heavily. MOD data hit 1,000 daily in October, but this spike spells doom. After summer lulls, Russia's back to 1,000 plus deaths per day. No plan B? Why? On October 10, Russia launched aerial RAF, boasting destroyed targets while losing 1,060 on October 11. Does Putin even notice the carnage? Twist, this volume doctrine echoes Germany's Kursk defeat, yet Russia bets on sheer numbers. But economic jaws now snap shut. Discerning viewers, as Russia's men die en masse with no retreat, Kremlin officials mask reality. In certain regions, supply issues loom, yet they're sure to evaporate. Reuters quoted Siluanov claiming confidence. But he's dead wrong. Ukraine's long-range drone assaults incite this chaos, unyielding. China, Russia's key oil buyer, now sells refined products back amid shortages. How ironic. Energy giants bleed, while purchasers profit. Sour stench of futility hangs heavy. Yet Ukrainian strikes on energy lifelines escalate, relentless hammer blows. Not fading, intensifying daily. Ukraine battered 21 of Russia's 38 giant refineries in 2025, some hit repeatedly. 48% spike over 2024. Why relent when gas lines snake Russia, drivers cursing fates? Desperation breeds foreign buys. October 1, key independent outlet reported Russia scavenging Asian gasoline, 40% refinery shutdowns fueling panic. China leads, Belarus follows. First sting of Dutch disease, Russia shouldn't import what it exports plentifully. Oil and gas underpin economy. Exports dominate revenues, indirect ones too. Gasoline stations limp when energy spasms. Deep hurt, then deeper irony pursues. Feel the burn? Russia's riches now cripple it. Intersecting conflicts reveal Russia's energy pain. Why panic over fuel queues? Core economy falters. Early symptom metastasizes, imports erode self-reliance. Businesses propped by petroleum wobble. Layer upon layer, vulnerability exposes. Patriots might ponder, is this deliverance or downfall? Kremlin boasts overcoming hurdles, but strikes deep in cuts. Deeper still, wounded economy scars the empire. What hidden irony waits? Europe's whispers turn to roars. Every day, countless Russian soldiers are sent into the relentless battlefield of Ukraine, where tragedy looms at every turn. Daily reports reveal staggering losses, painting a grim picture of a war that seems to have turned into an unending nightmare for Russia. For any other nation, these casualties would signal a dire need for re-evaluation, but for the Kremlin, it appears to be part of a grand strategy. Recent data published by various sources, including the UK's Ministry of Defence, indicates that in 2025 alone, Russia has already suffered over 332,000 casualties since the beginning of the year. To put this into perspective, that averages to nearly 35,000 soldiers lost each month. The cumulative toll since the invasion began in February 2022 has exceeded 1.1 million, a shocking number by any metric. For most nations, such staggering losses would lead to a retreat or a dramatic change in strategy, yet Russia seems unwavering, claiming that everything is proceeding as planned. In September, the average daily loss was around 950 soldiers, reflecting a slight improvement from earlier months. But as October unfolded, those numbers took a worrying turn, surpassing 1,000 daily casualties. The absence of a robust evacuation system for wounded soldiers has only worsened the situation. Reports indicate a chilling ratio of 1.3 injured soldiers for every death, a troubling reality that underscores the brutality of this conflict. As October progressed, the battlefront remained fiercely active. On a particular day, a staggering 1,200 Russian troops fell in just 24 hours. Alongside significant losses in equipment and machinery. Every engagement ended with devastating results for Russia, undermining their ability to mount organized teams for future attacks. But why is this gruesome reality not leading to a strategic pivot for Russia? The answer lies in a troubling belief among the leadership: they think they can achieve victory through sheer numbers. However, their enemies are learning and adapting quickly. As October continues, will Russia's costly strategy begin to crumble under its own weight? The losses are stacking up, and the conflict only seems to intensify. Will the Kremlin ever realize that their plan A is failing, or are they bound to repeat the cycle of sacrifice indefinitely? Building on the last part, we saw how industries relying on Russia's energy sector crumble without it, and Ukraine's smart strikes exploit the vastness of the country. Can you imagine fueling a nation only to watch it grind to a halt, its own life's blood poisoning the body? That's the shocking reality unraveling for Russia as Ukraine's strikes slice deeper into economic veins. The air thickens with the stench of diesel fumes and unburned oil, while the roar of trucks echoes like distant thunder over parched highways. Russia's refineries scatter across the sprawling land, a deliberate spread to cut delivery costs for fuel not traveling far. Warburg uncovers this tactic, where locations minimize that final haul, letting refined energy reach Russian regions without extra strain. But now, Ukraine retaliates, pounding targets as far as its long-range drones can fly, turning that advantage against Putin. The remaining refineries humming at full tilt? They're the ones safe from attacks, tucked away where Ukraine's reach falters. And guess what? Vital gasoline now faces longer journeys to needy regions. Picture it, refined products get shoveled into waiting trucks and trains, consuming more of the very fuel they carry for those extended trips. It's a vicious cycle, with engines growling louder under heavier loads, exhaling black smoke that chokes the rural skies. Even imported gas hits the same wall. Russia has limited ports for incoming shipments, forcing every barrel across vast distances. This piles on costs, amplifying a crisis dubbed Russian Dutch disease, an over-reliance on oil that now eats itself. Experts warn Russia's economy risks seizing up, starved of revenue and drowned in expenses. Without accessible energy, what happens? Daxel commerce halts, no fuel means no movement, no trades, no sustenance. As of October 12, Pravda reports over half of Russia's regions gripped by fuel droughts. Lines at stations stretch like ranking chains, where drivers can only grab 10 to 20 liters per visit, merely 2.64 to 5.28 gallons. That's nothing close to tank aching. Pumps click dry, the metallic sting of empty nozzles in your hand a daily taunt. The humiliating irony? Russia's fix only fuels the fire, locking it in a chokehold. Stay tuned, because the next shock exposes how this meltdown humiliates Putin's empire on the world stage. What's the game-changing twist waiting to bury them deeper? In the biting wind of the Ukrainian front, countless Russian soldiers are pushed into a relentless cycle of conflict. Each day, they face staggering odds, becoming mere data points in the Kremlin's grand strategy. Despite heavy losses, over 332,000 casualties reported in 2025 alone, the Russian government maintains its narrative, insisting that everything is proceeding according to plan. How can a nation so battered and bruised continue to fight? Statistics reveal a disturbing reality. Russia has lost approximately 1.118 million troops since the war ramped up in February 2022. Recent data from the UK Ministry of Defence shows that, astonishingly, Russia is losing around 35,000 soldiers each month. The question arises, when does a leader recognize when the bloodshed cannot be justified? For Vladimir Putin, it appears, there is no such threshold. In September 2025, the casualty rate dipped to levels not seen since earlier months, suggesting a momentary reprieve. Yet, this fleeting decline swiftly dissipated. By October, daily losses exceeded 1,000 soldiers, with the month shaping up to be dire. A report from United 24 Media indicates that on a single day, October 14, Russian forces suffered the loss of 1,200 troops, coupled with significant equipment damage. What does it mean to sacrifice this many lives for a strategy that appears to be unraveling? Insidiously, the truth about Russia's combat effectiveness is revealed through its staggering casualty ratios. A recent investigation by Politica and the BBC uncovered a chilling statistic. For every soldier killed, there is only a 1.3 to 1 ratio of injuries. Far below the survival rates seen in past conflicts. This indicates a grim reality where wounded soldiers often remain abandoned on the battlefield, deepening the loss of life. How can an army function when its own policies contribute to such tragic outcomes? Yet this fight extends beyond the battlefield. The economic implications of warfare gnaw at Russia's core, as systemic issues lead to fuel shortages. As of mid-October, desperate citizens find themselves limited to mere liters of gasoline for their vehicles, creating paralyzing conditions for businesses. A process known as Dutch disease, previously afflicting the Netherlands, now festers within Russia, a symptom of wealth concentrated among the elite while the populace struggles. But what happens when the foundations of an economy built on war begin to crumble? Oligarchs, shielded from the repercussions of war, continue to amass wealth as the average citizen suffers. In just a year, Russia's wealthiest have seen their fortunes swell by $20 billion. Against this backdrop of increasing poverty and desperation, they remain insulated, profiting from a system that prioritizes personal gain over national revival. Will this greed ultimately lead to their downfall, or will they continue to thrive as a nation crumbles? As battles rage on and the death toll climbs, one has to ask, where is the path forward for Russia? Can it sustain a war effort that is draining its resources and manpower while its leaders remain ensconced in their luxurious lives? The stakes are high, and with each soldier that does not return, the fabric of Russia's military might frays ever further. What consequences await when the dust settles and the remnants of a once unstoppable force are finally revealed? Only time will tell. Every day, countless lives are lost on the front lines of the Ukraine conflict. A relentless stream of Russian soldiers is being drawn into a battle that seems to have no purpose, turning their lives into mere statistics amidst the chaos. The staggering losses paint a picture not just of individual sacrifice, but of a strategy that defies logic. How can a nation continue to pour its youth into a conflict that leaves them broken and fallen? Recent reports reveal that Russia has faced monumental casualties, with the UK's Ministry of Defence estimating that in 2025 alone, over 332,000 soldiers have been lost. This staggering figure translates into nearly 35,000 lives extinguished each month. Compounding this grim statistic is the total casualty count, which now exceeds 1.1 million since the full-scale invasion in February 2022. One must ponder, how much longer can Russia sustain this war machine fueled by the bodies of its own men? Even amidst such losses, the Kremlin insists that everything is progressing according to their plan. But the reality on the ground tells another story. While September recorded a brief decline in casualties, averaging about 950 per day, the tides have since turned. Already in October, those numbers have surged past 1,000 daily, echoing the devastating totals of earlier months. It begs the question, has Russia truly learned anything from its past strategic missteps, or are they blindly marching towards their doom? A shocking report indicates that Russia's ratio of wounded to dead is alarmingly low, only 1.3 injured for every soldier lost. With insufficient evacuation systems in place, many of the wounded remain stranded and without care, leading to an inevitable increase in death tolls. This grim scenario raises an unsettling thought. Are the sacrifices of these soldiers merely pawns in a larger game, valued not for their lives but for their ability to bolster a failing regime? The repercussions extend beyond the battlefield. The war's toll reflects the faltering state of Russia's economy, heavily reliant on its oil and gas sector for revenues, which make up nearly 50% of the federal budget. As supply and demand dynamics shift, some oligarchs profit immensely while the populace suffers, a stark reminder of the country's ongoing struggle with what is known as Dutch disease. If the energy sector continues to thrive at the expense of others, what future awaits a nation where innovation is stifled for the sake of maintaining control? As Russian troops face escalating losses, the cycle of death and injury seems never-ending. The clash at the front lines isn't just about territory, it's a brutal confrontation between humanity and a machine that keeps grinding on, indifferent to the cost. Could this relentless pursuit of dominance ultimately lead to the undoing of both the troops fighting and the leadership guiding them? The answers remain elusive, hanging in the balance as the conflict shows no signs of abating. The world watches, breath held, as the narrative unfolds in a grim tale of ambition, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of war. Every day, Russia pours its soldiers into the relentless chaos of the war in Ukraine, where countless lives are extinguished in a catastrophic cycle of violence. This isn't just a crisis, it's a grave miscalculation of colossal proportions. While other nations might re-evaluate their strategies after suffering such staggering losses, the Kremlin pushes forward, convinced that this is the path to victory. As of October 12, military reports reveal around 332,000 Russian casualties in just 2025 alone. This alarming statistic, astonishingly high for any military operation, brings the total since the invasion began in February 2022 to over 1.1 million. Can you fathom the weight of those numbers? A staggering loss that, in any other context, would lead to surrender or a desperate scramble for a ceasefire. Yet, Russia remains steadfast, even as its armies crumble. In a shocking twist, September 2025 saw a reduction in casualties to about 950 daily. Was Russia finally learning? Not quite. As October dawned, those numbers surged past 1,000 per day yet again. The question looms, can Russia sustain such a relentless sacrifice of lives? The situation worsens when we consider the survival rates of the wounded. Where once there might have been one death for every 4.5 injuries, the current ratio is just 1.3 wounded for every death. What does this suggest about the dire battlefield conditions? In an eye-opening report, media sources revealed that ineffective medical evacuation systems left soldiers to languish without care. This grim reality means that day after day, the Russian military watches its soldiers fall, neither dead nor rescued. Imagine the chaos and despair, the acrid scent of smoke, the cries of the injured, the echoes of artillery fire, soldiers caught in a war machine grinding lives to dust. On October 14, Ukraine reported fierce engagements, losing 1,200 troops in a single day, alongside a staggering loss of vehicles and artillery. This raises an unsettling question: will Russia's strategy of attrition continue to backfire, or is there a deeper pattern in its apparent folly? The dark irony lingers. While showcasing airstrikes as victories, Russia consistently suffers grave losses. Now, as we near the end of 2025, the battlefield becomes a gruesome paradox, with Russia aggressively pursuing its goals without a viable alternative. Is sheer manpower truly the master plan, or is this a desperate gamble? As we delve deeper, the tension mounts. What lies ahead for a nation so entrenched in its ambitions? The answer might be more shocking than you think. Imagine if every sunrise brought not hope, but the grinding roar of drones and the acrid stench of gunpowder soaking into the earth. That's the brutal reality for Russia's soldiers in Ukraine, fed daily into a relentless meat grinder by their own commanders. Thousands vanish each day amid the shattered fields, drones buzzing like relentless bees and landmines exploding with deafening cracks. Ukraine holds the line, claiming victory after victory, while Russia's troops are torn apart. For any sane nation, this would scream catastrophic defeat, but for the Kremlin, it's all part of a twisted plan. On October 14, a Euromaidan press exposé shattered illusions, citing the UK's Ministry of Defence data. Russia has suffered a staggering 332,000 casualties by early 2025, up to October 12. Crunch those numbers, and it's nearly 35,000 soldiers erased monthly. That adds to prior losses since Vladimir Putin's invasion in February 2022, pushing the grim total to 1.118 million Russian lives lost. Ukraine's figures hover near 1.125 million, a mere 7,000 difference, roughly the size of Estonia's active force, with 7,700 personnel. Yet for the Kremlin, 7,000 more dead or maimed is just another grind of the gears. No other army would endure such slaughter, declaring ceasefire or retreat. But Russia presses on, viewing this slaughter as strategy. Delve deeper into the metrics from the Mods X posts breaking it down. September averaged 950 daily losses, a slight uptick from August's record low since April 2024, almost good news for Russia. Yet cruelty surged in 2025 spring, nearing 1,300 per day. March and April alone claimed 36,000 lives. September offered a 27% dip from that peak, but October climbed again, exceeding 1,000 daily deaths from October 5 to 12. Russia slips back into heavier bloodletting as the year ends, with more soldiers dying than ever. Casualties include killed, wounded, captured, and sidelined fighters, but the dead-to-wounded ratio paints a darker picture. World War II's Kursk battle saw Soviet troops endure 2.29 wounded per death in the first week, improving to 2.68 later. The UK fluctuated between 1.67 and 4.59 wounded per death in wartime. The US held steady at 5 wounded per 1 killed. Modern conflicts, like US campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, skew even better, 4.5 and 7.3 wounded per death, saving lives through swift evacuations. Russia's reality? A punitive joint report from Mediazona and BBC on October 13 exposed August 2025 figures, just 1.3 wounded for every death. No proper evacuations leave soldiers abandoned, their untrained medical skills useless. The battlefield reeks of untreated wounds festering in the mud, screams echoing as aid never comes. With October's 1,000 daily deaths, nearly half the casualties perish forever, unfit to fight again. Imagine the visceral panic, the metallic taste of blood as Russia sacrifices savable lives, because why evacuate when manpower is disposable? This casualty rate eclipses even Kursk's horrors, the war's largest clash. Yet the Soviets turned Kursk into victory, halting Germany's Eastern Front ambitions. Russia gambles on sheer numbers for triumph in Ukraine, pouring bodies like coins into a slot machine. But the toll worsens daily. On October 14, United 24 media detailed 190 combat clashes across Ukraine's front. Russia bled 1,200 troops, plus 5 tanks, 29 artillery pieces, 145 vehicles, and 390 drones. Ukraine struck hard at command hubs and gear, disrupting future assaults. Each devastated post scatters Russian efforts, guaranteeing more chaos and corpses. The MOD noted October's daily 1,000 losses, but on October 14, it spiked to 1,300. Canada's downward trend crumbled, Russia spirals back into abyss, lacking any plan B. Russia's defiance? On October 10, massive airstrikes drew Kremlin praise, claiming targets obliterated. Yet that day cost Russia over 1,060 lives, per Ukrainian reports from October 11. The world gapes at this denial, as Russia gloats over bombs while soldiers rot. Picking up from the staggering human cost where soldiers suffocate in the quagmire of war, Russia's economy twists under the Kremlin's grip. Shortages haunted businesses, from Q1 2024's 13% lacking capital to 25% by year's end, per BBC monitoring. Manufacturing boomed only through war-driven gears, distorting the whole. A Spiegel finance analysis, cited by the outlet, unveils stark truths. Over 3 years, Russia's 18.3% manufacturing growth hinged on the military-industrial complex, claiming over 20% through sector links. Precise reads elude us, but civilian sectors drown in red, teetering negative. 2024 was bleak, 2025 plunges deeper into shadows. Why toil elsewhere when war industries lure with golden chains? High pay draws workers into war-forged factories, flooding locals with cash for eateries and shops. Buzzing marketplaces thrive briefly on spilled wages, scents of fresh bread masking the void. Yet cracks form, competing shops starve, unable to match the lure of deadly perks. Economist Wahlberg warns it's a mirage. When war ceases, military firms vanish, draining economies dry. Traditional jobs evaporate first, leaving devastation like a silent night after a storm. Tiny military towns, legacies of industry, crumble hardest. Picture America's Rust Belt for a preview. Forbes notes it housed a third of the U.S. population in 1950, minus New York City. Steel, coal, and vehicles hummed across the expanse. Time eroded it all, manufacturing shipped overseas, coal tainted by oil, gas, and green tides. By 2000, the belt's share shrunk to a quarter of America's populace. Is Russia charting the same doomed path, entire communities hollowed by war's false prosperity? The once vibrant heartlands now echo with job exodus, factories rusting like abandoned ruins. What if this is Russia's hidden defeat, not on battlefields but in the hollowing of its soul? Pauses for breath, building on the shattering parallels to a collapsing Rust Belt, where factories hum only for war, Russia's workforce flees to high-paying militant realms. Short-term prosperity masks looming apocalypse, as local commerce wilts, outbought by military gold. The outlet cites Spiegel Finance, estimating 18.3% manufacturing surge over 3 years, with over 20 percentage points fueled by military complexes via linkages. Exact figures prove elusive, signaling civilian sectors wallow in losses. 2024's gloom intensifies in 2025, buildings erect. Piecing together shattered dreams. Soldiers trade lives for coin, why choose peasantry when war beckons richly? Immediate gains boost nearby haunts, restaurants bustling with laughter, shops alive with bargains. But survival demands matching strife siren song. Wahlberg pummels the illusion, war's end spells corporate doom, economies gutted of income, traditional pillars long gone. Cataclysm looms, tangential to the firearm. Fragile military enclaves, imbued with industry's ancient marrow, strain mightily. Single industry towns, woven from one thread, unravel. America's Rust Belt exemplifies perfectly. Excluding New York City, Forbes recalls it harbored a third of the nation's 1950 souls. Steel, coal, auto realms dominated. Globalization outsourced steel and cars, economic shifts sidelined coal for fossil fuel rivals and eco-innovations. By 2000, the Belt's populace dwindled to a quarter. Russia's trajectory mirrors this wasteland, societies fractured by transient war wealth. The Kremlin boasts tactics amidst withering souls. Is this the ultimate twist, victory forged in economic ash? What unthinkable irony hides in this devastation? As drones drone and casualties mount, the Kremlin's plan hemorrhages not just flesh, but the very fabric of Russian life. Will communities crumple like Kursk's fields under the weight, or forge a muted rebellion? Stay tuned, as the shadows deepen, revealing if Russia's gamble births triumph or a ghost nation forever scarred. Pauses, the stakes rise, the question burns, can sheer numbers defy destiny's cruel logic? Or is this the Kremlin's final, fatal mistake? In the heart of Eastern Europe, a war rages on that sees a stark anomaly. Russia, despite staggering losses, continues to send its soldiers to face the relentless Ukrainian defense. Each day, the toll on Russian troops rises, with figures that would signal catastrophe for any other nation involved in conflict. Yet, in a chilling twist of logic, this relentless flow of casualties is seen as part of the Kremlin's strategy. Recent reports from the UK's Ministry of Defence paint a grim picture of the human cost of this war. As of October 2025, Russian losses have hit a shocking 332,000 soldiers in just this year alone, contributing to a grand total of 1.118 million since the invasion began in February 2022. How can any government willingly sacrifice so many lives without a plan B? The reality is haunting. Each day, an average of 950 soldiers fell in September alone, marking a decline yet still drowning in numbers. As we moved into October, hopes were dashed as casualties crept back up to over 1,000 daily. The haunting echoes of gunfire are accompanied by the cries of wounded comrades left behind due to inadequate medical support. Diving deeper, it becomes evident that this isn't just a number game. The ratio of wounded to dead for Russian forces is even bleak compared to past conflicts. A recent report revealed a meager 1.3 wounded for every death. This is a shocking failure of basic military strategy, where soldiers are sacrificed and abandoned on the battlefield. The lack of evacuation systems not only dooms these individuals but also signals a dire situation for the Kremlin. Further complicating matters. Ukrainian forces have been engaged in intense defensive operations, reporting over 190 engagements on a single recent day. This relentless push has resulted in catastrophic losses for Russia, with reports indicating a loss of 1,200 troops in just one day. The reverberations of artillery and the aftermath of chaos serve as a grim reminder of the cost of war. This grim reality leaves one profound question lingering: what is the endgame for Russia? Are they truly prepared to face the consequences of their strategy? As the conflict escalates and the casualty rates rise, the situation for Russia appears increasingly bleak, suggesting that their approach, far from being a well-thought-out strategy, may ultimately lead them to a disastrous downfall. As we dig deeper into this unfolding tragedy, we must ask ourselves, what will it take for the Russian leadership to realize that this path leads to ruin? The clock is ticking, and the ground shakes under the weight of their choices. Every day, countless soldiers from Russia are sent into the unforgiving chaos of the war in Ukraine. The toll is staggering, as these individuals face lethal drones, relentless artillery, and explosive mines, all part of a deadly landscape where many tragically never escape. Against all logic, such losses should signal a glaring failure in strategy for any attacking force. But for Russia, this is merely a piece of a calculated game orchestrated by the Kremlin. Recently, shocking statistics have emerged, painting a grim picture of the ongoing conflict. According to the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence, Russian casualties have soared to an extraordinary 332,000 in just a short time frame. If we break this down, it becomes even more alarming. Russia is losing close to 35,000 soldiers per month. In total, since the onset of the invasion in February of 2022, over 1.1 million Russian lives have been lost. These numbers, closely mirroring estimates from Ukrainian sources, showcase a cataclysmic drain on Russia's military strength. One might wonder how a country could continuously absorb such staggering losses without shifting its approach. Most nations would have thrown in the towel by now, seeking alternatives in strategy or at least a temporary ceasefire. But for Russia, abandoning soldiers has become a norm, as if the Kremlin has accepted these losses as mere numbers on a board. Breaking down casualty rates reveals an unsettling reality. The Ministry of Defense recently shared that Russia's average daily loss was approximately 950 soldiers in September, a figure that, while down from previous months, does not tell the whole story. A closer inspection shows October's numbers surging once again. Casualty rates have risen to over 1,000 daily. This rapid decline back into the abyss symbolizes a lack of alternative plans, highlighting an unwavering reliance on sheer manpower to sustain their operations. Yet, the magnitude of these losses becomes even clearer when we analyze the ratio of deaths to injuries. A recent report revealed an alarming fact: only 1.3 soldiers are wounded for every death, worryingly low compared to historical conflict ratios. This lack of effective medical evacuation on the battlefield means a heavy mortality rate, as troops are left behind without aid. Each day, 1,000 soldiers are added to the count of those who will not return, fueling a relentless cycle of loss. October 14 brought a dramatic twist as Ukrainian forces engaged in over 190 skirmishes, leading to the loss of 1,200 Russian troops in just one day, along with substantial military assets. Ukraine's calculated strikes not only cripple Russia's personnel but also target command structures crucial for planning future assaults. The destruction of command posts diminishes any chance of a cohesive Russian strategy, ensuring that disorganization breeds further casualties. Suddenly, a question looms: has Russia underestimated Ukraine's resilience? With each day, the Kremlin appears oblivious to the evolving battlefield dynamics. In recent months, it seemed Russia might learn from its costly mistakes, but instead, we witness a grim return to old strategies. Where sending wave after wave of troops amounts to an unending meat grinder. Amidst the devastation, the Kremlin launched massive airstrikes, claiming success as it celebrated the destruction of designated targets. But the irony? On the same day, Russia mourned the loss of over 1,000 soldiers. It begs the question: does any victory truly exist if the cost is so catastrophic? As we delve deeper into this theater of war, we find that Russia's bravado may soon face a turning point, a realization that numbers alone cannot forge success in the chaos of battle. In a grim tableau of modern warfare, Russia continues to press forward in a conflict that seems to devour its own soldiers. Every day, the machine of war churns relentlessly, grinding down manpower in the Ukraine conflict. But what is truly shocking is this: despite the staggering loss of life, the Kremlin insists that everything is unfolding as planned. As of mid-October 2025, nearly 332,000 Russian soldiers have been claimed by the battlefield, a staggering statistic that accelerates the grim total to over 1.1 million since the invasion began in February 2022. Imagine that: 1.1 million families torn apart, futures extinguished, all for a cause that seems more futile by the day. Just think about it: could any nation facing such catastrophic losses persist with the same zealousness? Breaking the numbers down creates an even bleaker picture. On average, Russia has been losing nearly 35,000 soldiers each month, particularly in October, an average of 1,000 each day. August had seen a slight reprieve, but a troubling increase looms, hinting that Russia is slipping back into its dangerous patterns. The sound of boots hitting the ground is drowned out by the echo of artillery and cries of injured men left to die where they fall, as the battlefield becomes a graveyard devoid of hope. Yet, what adds more weight to this tragedy is not just how many die but how they die. Reports suggest that there are only 1.3 wounded soldiers for every Russian soldier killed. This harrowing statistic paints a picture of a military incapable of properly handling the wounded, leaving them vulnerable. This startling survival rate implies that those who could be saved are simply left behind. How many lives could have been rescued? As Ukraine braces for weeks of more relentless assaults, early interventions point to a different kind of triumph. On October 14, Ukrainian forces battled valiantly against a staggering 190 engagements with Russian troops, claiming over 1,200 Russian lives in a single day. Can't you just hear the chaos erupting on the front lines? Explosions rumbling, the air heavy with the acrid scent of burning metal and smoke as smoke-filled skies betray the hopes of a conquering army. This harrowing surge of violence signifies a definitive shift. Ukraine's air defenses aren't simply absorbing attacks, they're countering them with extraordinary efficiency. In recent weeks, these systems have been credited with intercepting or neutralizing hundreds of drones in a single day. Meanwhile, Russia, both its commanders and soldiers, grapple with the crushing reality as their ambitions collapse amid unrelenting resistance. And where does all of this lead? To a chilling realization: if Russia's current trajectory continues, we're witnessing the demise of entire battalions. Without a fundamentally different strategy, it's as if the Kremlin believes that sheer numbers will overpower the resilience of valor. But can brute force alone ever win the day, especially when facing someone with a sense of purpose and fierce determination? The haunting question remains: as the losses mount, will the Kremlin ever reconsider its strategy, or will it stubbornly march forward into the abyss, blinded by its ambitions? The battlefield continues to breathe a heavy sigh, yearning for a resolution that's fast becoming elusive. The answers, like the soldiers lost in the chaos, are now retreating into silence. In the heart of a relentless conflict, the brutal reality of warfare is laid bare. Russia continues to send its troops into the Ukrainian battlefield, where chaos reigns. With each passing day, the losses mount in staggering numbers. It is not merely a battle but a war of attrition, reminiscent of a meat grinder. The statistics paint a shocking picture. Russia has suffered around 332,000 casualties in just the first 3 quarters of 2025. Every month, almost 35,000 soldiers are lost to this nightmare. How can a nation bear such losses and still claim success? The grim truth reveals itself further as we consider the cumulative toll since February 2022, over 1.1 million soldiers lost. In stark contrast, any other nation facing such devastating losses would have called for a ceasefire, or sought another strategy. Yet, for Russia, these casualties are part of the grim plan devised by the Kremlin. As revealed in reports, the daily toll appears to fluctuate. In September, Russia lost nearly 950 soldiers each day. Though this represented a drop from earlier months, October saw a sinister resurgence, with around 1,000 troops falling daily. The battlefield is their grave, where the ground is soaked with blood, the haunting noises of war surround them, bomb blasts, anguished cries, and the unyielding whir of drones circling overhead. But numbers alone do not tell the full story. The true scope of losses becomes evident when examining the ratio of deaths to injuries. A striking revelation came from a report indicating only 1.3 wounded for every soldier killed, a catastrophic statistic. These wounded warriors, often forsaken on the battlefield, have little chance of survival in such dire conditions. The Kremlin's negligence in evacuating the injured foreshadows a grim future for its forces. On October 14, an alarming encounter unfolded. Ukrainian forces engaged in 190 combat operations, resulting in a staggering loss of 1,200 Russian troops in just one day, alongside substantial equipment damage. The thundering sounds of battle echoed as Ukraine's skilled defense struck efficiently, targeting command posts essential for coordination. Each loss of command reduces the capability for organized assaults, leading to more casualties, ultimately exacerbating Russia's plight. This woeful cycle continues. While Russia celebrates fleeting victories, its losses compound daily. The October 10 airstrike by Russia was accompanied by claims of successful damage to Ukrainian infrastructure. However, the accompanying loss of over 1,000 soldiers starkly contradicts any narrative of triumph. How can such a war strategy persist against overwhelming losses? In this chess match of survival where each move counts, Russia's apparent reliance on numbers seems fundamentally flawed. Its heavy-handed tactics yield little more than an avalanche of fallen soldiers. There is no plan B. The Kremlin believes in the strength of sheer numbers, even as they bleed out on the battlefield. This startling juxtaposition raises a chilling question: can a nation genuinely sustain its ambitions while continuously sacrificing its most valuable resource, its soldiers? As casualties rise, the echoes of both triumph and tragedy ring out, showcasing the harsh reality of warfare, where victory remains ephemeral and survival uncertain. Every day, Russia is sending countless soldiers into the relentless chaos of the war in Ukraine. These valiant souls face machinery that tears them apart, leaving many trapped forever on the battlefield. While most nations would consider such losses a catastrophic failure, for Russia, this grim reality is part of a larger plan devised by the Kremlin. Recent revelations have exposed shocking figures. Russia's military has endured a staggering 332,000 casualties since the start of 2025 alone. This data, coming from the UK's Ministry of Defence, paints a dismal picture. With around 35,000 soldiers lost each month, and an overall tally of over 1.1 million since February 2022, these numbers compel us to question, how much longer can Russia sustain such heavy losses? In a surprising twist, September 2025 recorded a slight decrease in casualties, with an average of 950 soldiers lost per day, a breath of relief for Russia amidst their ongoing struggle. However, October has reversed this trend. The casualty rates have risen again, surpassing 1,000 daily, dragging Russia back into a cycle of overwhelming death and destruction. What's haunting is the grim reality behind these casualty figures. Less than half of those recorded as injured can hope to survive, due to inadequate evacuation protocols and a lack of trained medics on the battlefield. This report suggests that Russia's military is suffering severe manpower losses, with a ratio of only 1.3 wounded soldiers for every death. Unlike past conflicts, where advances in medical care improved survival rates, Russia appears stuck in a tragic cycle of disregard for its service members. Just as the shadow of defeat looms, shocking engagements erupt on the front lines. On October 14, Ukraine reported 190 clashes with Russian troops, resulting in 1,200 losses for the invaders in a single day, including tanks and artillery. This persistent destruction not only cripples the Russian military but also challenges its organizational capabilities. What's more alarming is that Russia seems oblivious to its own high casualty rates. The Ministry of Defense has proclaimed satisfaction with their recent airstrikes, despite losing over 1,000 soldiers on the same day. Clearly, they operate under the misapprehension that sheer force alone can secure victory, ignoring the horrendous costs involved. In a world where battles reveal the truth of attrition, Russia's approach raises critical questions about military strategy and human cost. As the war grinds on, the horrifying reality becomes clear. With the unyielding death toll and no viable alternative plan, how long can Russia continue to pour its soldiers into this horror, ignoring the lessons of history and the cries for change? The clock is ticking, and the stakes have never been higher. In a chilling twist of fate, every day, Russia pushes its soldiers into the relentless war in Ukraine, where countless lives are lost. Despite the staggering death toll, the Kremlin insists its campaign is progressing seamlessly. By mid-October 2025, authorities revealed that Russia has suffered an astonishing 332,000 casualties this year alone, totaling over 1.1 million since the invasion began in February 2022. This relentless onslaught has resulted in under 35,000 soldiers lost each month. Tragically, it's as if the Kremlin has accepted this as part of its military strategy. Every invading nation would typically falter after losing this many soldiers, retreating to ponder alternate plans. But that's not Russia's approach. Instead, it clings to a disastrous plan, convinced that sheer manpower will secure victory. As bleak as the figures are, they only scratch the surface of the unfolding calamity. Can you imagine the horror of daily losses spiraling beyond comprehension? Casualty rates in September hinted at a decline, yet with October came a terrifying resurgence, pushing daily losses back over 1,000, each death a stark reminder of the tragedy unfolding. Digging deeper reveals an even darker truth: the wounded-to-dead ratio in the Russian military is horrifically out of balance. Whereas many armies have improved this metric through advances in medicine and logistics, Russia falters. Recent reports show only 1.3 soldiers injured for every one fatality, devastatingly poor numbers. This indicates that as Russia suffers, it's not just injuries that burden it. The lives of young men, Their futures extinguished, lay heavy on the battlefield with little hope of recovery. Ukraine's resilience comes into play as it continues to thwart Russian advances, despite the immense pressure. In a single day, Ukraine boasted 190 engagements with Russian forces, leading to an additional 1,200 troops lost along with substantial military assets. With every command post taken down, Russia's attempts at coordinated assaults become increasingly chaotic and deadly. As you ponder this grim state of affairs, consider the implications for Ukraine's resolve. Conflict is messy, but it's a consistent reminder that strategy and humanity often clash. With everything hanging by a thread, will Russia finally reconsider its relentless strategy, or are we destined to witness even more profound losses? The clock ticks, the battlefield waits, and for many, hope seems dim. As the world watches, Ukraine calls for international support, urging allies to fortify its defenses against the looming threats. But amidst the suffering, there's a spark of courage igniting within the hearts of those who fight. Will this spark grow into an inferno that burns the ambitions of aggressors down to ashes, or will it be snuffed out in the chaos of war? Can you believe Russia's leaders are grinning while their soldiers vanish into a meat grinder, each day a brutal tally of failure? As Ukraine's defenses stand tall against relentless assaults, shattering drones and missiles, remember how this conflict spirals into chaos with rogue attacks on vital depots. Now, imagine the roar of engines, the acrid smoke choking the air, as Ukraine turns the tables on Russia's reckless fury. Is Ukraine's air force finally bending the war's tide, humiliating Putin with every downed weapon and sparked inferno? Picture the night sky erupting in flashes of orange and red, the earth trembling under explosive crashes, as Ukraine's guardians repel a tidal wave of death. Without these shields, the screams of the innocent would echo endlessly, hospitals crumbling, homes ablaze under Russia's blind rage. Yet, Kiev's marvel of strategy and tech halts upwards of 80% of these threats, a defiant slap against the Kremlin's arrogance. Just days ago, on October 9, they swatted away hundreds, leaving millions in shattered scrap. Feel the sweat on the controls, the heartbeat pounding in pilots' ears, as they turn invaders to ash. Russia hurls wave after wave, drones buzzing like angry hornets, missiles slicing through cold air, but Ukraine's defenses catch them in a deadly dance. On October 5, nearly 550 attackers fell, 439 Shahed and Gerberat drones snuffed out, 1 Kinzhal missile destroyed, 32 Iskander-K cruise missiles vaporized, 6 calibers obliterated. Imagine the mournful wail of fallen tech, fuel leaking in rancid pools, as Ukraine's warriors claim victory. It's a pattern of brilliance, not luck, leaving Putin to stare at empty coffers and broken dreams. But those are just machines, the real heartbreak? Thousands of lives torn apart, families shattered in Ukraine's fray. The roar of counterattack shifts to Ukraine's side now. Drones hum low over fields, lasers guiding strikes on Russian hubs, depots crumpling in flames, command posts silencing mid-order. On October 13, the Crimean giant erupted, oil fields ablaze in a spectacle of destruction, the stench of burning fuel lingering like a curse. Allies' aid bolsters the stand, but Ukraine proves it thrives alone, outpacing Moscow's brute force. What if this firestorm exposes Russia's brittle facade, revealing a superpower crumbling under its own cruelty? Ukraine's resolve hardens with each battle, minimizing devastation while celebrating swift missile takedowns. Russia's brash strikes ravage pipes and homes, but response comes sharp and searing. Aviation teams, missile units, artillery, all converge to dismantle invaders' nests. Strikes on 7 personnel clusters, 3 posts, and more artillery pieces echo like thunder in the quiet dawn. Feel the vibration through boots on soil, the distant boom resolving to victory. Russia's thrashing ends in humiliation, its vaunted air show a farce amid mounting losses over 1,000 daily. What untold agony hides behind those numbers, soldiers left bleeding out without aid? Ukraine triumphs here, Ukraine suffers there, casualties climb, yet defenses evolve, repelling more threats than before. Twilight approaches, will this pattern fracture Putin's iron grip? Or unleash an even deadlier storm? The battlefield awaits, brimming with the scent of gunpowder and unresolved wrath. Imagine the horror of Russian airstrikes raining down on innocent lives. Hospitals crumbling under the assault, homes shattered, power grids flickering into darkness. All while Ukraine vows to stem the tide, minimizing casualties and damage with every retaliation. Yet, as Russia presses its ruthless aerial campaign against civilian targets, Ukraine strikes back with unmatched precision, targeting the heart of Russia's war machine. Can you believe it? Just days after that brutal exchange. On October 13, Ukrainian drones unleashed havoc on Russia's largest oil depot in the coastal city of Feodosia. A colossal blaze erupted, devouring the infrastructure, with sources from Ukraine's security service confirming the devastation. Footage from locals captured the chaos, massive flames leaping skyward, shrouding the city in suffocating black smoke, its acrid stench drifting miles away. Riders reported the fiery glow piercing the night, visible from distant horizons. But here's the twist: that chill ran deeper. The strike crippled not just the depot but a vital electrical substation nearby, and another in distant Simferopol. Ukraine's security service vowed to systematically dismantle Russia's military might, choking off fuel supplies for jeeps, tanks, generators, and more. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry claimed to have downed over 100 Ukrainian drones, including 40 over Crimea. Yet, their defenses crumbled. This multifunctional hub, handling 250,000 tons of oil and fuel via rail, sea, and road, burned fiercely. Feel the heat intensifying? Even a day later, the inferno raged on. A towering column of smoke blotting out the sky. How much priceless fuel has vanished in those flames? And with Russia's wounded-to-dead ratio soaring, is this the moment their grand plan crumbles, or will they sacrifice more lives in a bloody gamble for victory? What unthinkable tragedy awaits next on these ravaged shores? Will Ukraine's drones light the fuse for unimaginable explosions? The answer hangs in the air, thick with the smell of victory or defeat. In an unrelenting war, Russia's machinery of destruction grinds through Ukraine, sacrificing thousands of its own soldiers daily. Despite staggering losses, the Kremlin remains unfazed, claiming the war unfolds according to a grand design. Recent reports revealed a chilling figure: 332,000 Russian casualties in just the first months of 2025, with the total toll climbing over 1.1 million since the invasion began in February 2022. How can a nation continue to embrace such devastation? The answer lies within the Kremlin's distorted strategy. This situation becomes even grimmer as military data shared by the UK's Ministry of Defence indicates a clockwork of calamity. Russia lost nearly 35,000 soldiers a month in this conflict. What shadows loom over a nation that persists in waging war at such a cost? The cold numbers speak volumes. September saw an average of 950 soldiers lost daily. While that indicated a slight improvement over the earlier months, the reality is grim, and October has begun to unveil a new wave of losses. Reports detail that Russian casualties have surged back to over 1,000 a day as of mid-October, marking a disturbing trend. The sobering truth becomes clearer when examining the ratio of injuries to deaths. In a report, it was revealed that Russia faces a dire 1.3 wounded for every death, a staggering comparison to the past where the Soviet Union managed higher survival rates during fierce battles. This horrific statistic underscores the desperation within the ranks, yielding day after day of lives lost on the battlefield with little hope of recovery. Soldiers suffer, left behind without the aid they so desperately need, their cries echoing against the backdrop of war. To illustrate the severity of the situation, reports describe chaotic confrontations on October 14, where Ukrainian forces engaged Russian troops at 190 locations in a single day. The result? A harrowing loss for Russia: 1,200 soldiers, along with essential military equipment, destroyed in a single strike. Can Russia continue to march forward with such calamitous losses? The attacks disrupt their command structure and increase the potential for further losses, turning the tide against them. In this unfolding saga of conflict, one pivotal element was highlighted: the relentless attacks on vital fuel facilities, utterly essential to the Russian war engine. A recent catastrophic strike ignited a fire at a major depot, releasing thick toxic smoke that could be perceived from miles away. Nearby residents described the oppressive odor lingering in the air as a terrible reminder of the devastation wrought in the name of war. Why does Ukraine seem to hold the reins in this conflict? It's a tale of strategy over sheer force. Ukraine has steadily dismantled Russia's critical infrastructure, leading to an unprecedented fuel crisis. With soaring prices and gas stations unable to operate, the Kremlin finds itself in an increasingly desperate position. The recent blitz against the oil depot not only deepened the crisis but also elucidated the effectiveness of Ukraine's tactics, precision over chaos, leading the Russian war machine towards oblivion. So here we stand, on the precipice of uncertainty. What lies ahead? The echoes of battle can still be heard, and the direction of this war remains uncertain. As losses mount and desperation strengthens, the question of victory hangs precariously in the balance. With each counterattack, Ukraine's moves appear strategic, escalating the stakes higher and higher. Will Russia reconsider its path, or will it continue down this road of devastation? Only time will reveal the answers. In the raw hell of gunfire, where the earthy stench of mud and blood clings to every breath, Russia feeds thousands into Ukraine's unforgiving meat grinder daily. Soldiers vanish into drones that buzz like death's own swarm, mines exploding with earth-shaking roars beneath boots. Yet, the Kremlin grins, calling it plan. Picture this: October 14, Euromedian blasts the UK's Ministry of Defence data. Staggering, right? Russia hit 332,000 casualties just in 2025, up to October 12. That's nearly 35,000 monthly losses. Pile that on pre-2025 tolls, and boom, over 1.118 million since February 2022. Ukraine's figures? A hair higher at 1.125 million. Insane? Estonia's entire army is 7,700 strong, and Russia shrugs it off like chump change. Any sane nation quits at 1.1 million dead. Not Putin. This slaughter is by design, pure and twisted. Daily digs from the mod? September averaged 950 losses, down from April's brutal 1,300. But October surges past 1,000, climbing viciously. Casualties? Forget the count, they mask the horror. World War II Soviet ratios at Kursk, 2.29 to 2.68 injuries per death. Modern wars like Iraq? 7.3 to 1. Russia's twisted stat, 1.3 wounded for every dead. On October 13, Mediazona and BBC reported, no evacuations, untrained troops. On the battlefield, the atmosphere is heavy with uncertainty and chaos. Every day, countless lives are summoned to face unspeakable horrors in Ukraine. The relentless onslaught of Russian forces showcases a grim strategy, one that exposes an insatiable appetite for human sacrifice. Imagine a war-torn landscape, soldiers falling like autumn leaves, with Ukrainian drones and mines carving through their ranks. Yet, shockingly, the Kremlin insists everything is proceeding as planned. Recent reports have surfaced from the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence, revealing staggering numbers. By mid-October 2025, Russia has sustained an astonishing 332,000 casualties that year alone. This translates to almost 35,000 soldiers lost monthly. Over the course of the conflict, starting from the invasion in February 2022, the total losses soar to 1.118 million. Just contemplate that for a moment: over 1 million lives shattered, families grieving, futures extinguished. Conversely, Russia's military boasts resilience amid the devastation. In September 2025, reports indicated a decrease in casualties, a mere 950 per day compared to 1,300 in the spring. But this brief optimism evaporates as we edge into October, when reports indicate Russian losses escalating once more, surpassing 1,000 daily. The chilling reality is poignant: more soldiers are losing their lives than ever, their sacrifices seemingly unnoticed by their own command. Digging deeper reveals a harrowing truth: an unyielding cycle of injury and death. The wounded-to-dead ratio is grim. Politica notes a shocking revelation: only 1.3 soldiers are wounded for every fatality. This reflects a lamentable lack of adequate medical care and evacuation protocols, amplifying the agony on the battlefield. Imagine the heart-wrenching cries of those left behind, injured yet abandoned, fighting for their next breath. The situation tangles further as Ukraine makes its move. On October 14, they engaged in fierce combat, reporting significant losses inflicted on Russian troops, 1,200 soldiers down in a single day. Among those casualties were tanks, artillery, and drones, reflective of a tactical assault that is decimating Russia's command structure. The sound of explosions and the scent of burning machinery fill the air, signaling a devastating strike that cripples Russia's future operations. But why is Russia pursuing such a relentless course? The brutal reality witnesses an unwavering commitment to a strategy that banks on overwhelming numbers, dismissing the lessons of history where victories required far more than just sheer manpower. As winter looms, questions arise. Can a nation sustain battlefield losses at this rate? Will the Kremlin re-evaluate its approach, or will it continue to hammer away in this senseless grind? Every soldier's life lost is a tragedy, a poignant reminder of the cost of war. Yet, here we find ourselves, embroiled in a larger narrative that questions not only military tactics but the very essence of leadership and sacrifice in the face of unremitting adversity. As we delve deeper, we must confront an unsettling truth: what will be the ultimate cost of this relentless ambition? The answers remain cloaked in the ever-thickening fog of war. Every day, countless soldiers find themselves caught in a relentless war, part of a strategy that seems almost insane. Russia continues to pour its soldiers into the Ukraine conflict, where drones and mines mercilessly devastate their ranks. You might wonder, how does a nation continue such a catastrophic battle? On October 14, a shocking revelation from the UK's Ministry of Defence shattered the silence. Russian losses have surged to over 332,000 casualties just in 2025 alone. These numbers tell an ominous tale. If we consider October a partial month, that amounts to nearly 35,000 soldiers discarded like refuse monthly. And when combined with previous losses since the invasion began in February 2022, the total veers towards an astounding 1.1 million. This staggering figure suggests that Russia isn't merely losing soldiers, but entire battalions are vanishing into thin air. Imagine the sound of boots marching into oblivion. While any other nation facing similar losses would fold, Russia appears indifferent, sticking to its predetermined narrative. Released statistics indicate that in September, Russia lost an average of 950 soldiers daily, a rate described as a good sign compared to earlier figures. But can a nation truly celebrate a tragedy of this magnitude? Now, the strategic facade begins to crack. Throughout early October, the casualty count has escalated, surpassing 1,000 soldiers daily once again. The battlefield is unforgiving, and those numbers are likely to rise. But understanding only raw casualties doesn't tell the whole story. The true devastation lurks in the ratio of those killed versus those merely injured. Back in World War II, the Soviet Union faced horrific ratios of 2.29 injuries for every soldier lost. Today's Russia is experiencing something far worse, with reports indicating only 1.3 injured for each fatality. This terrible outcome is primarily due to a lack of effective medical evacuation systems. As each day ticks by, the laughter of young men echoes in the air, yet many of them will never return to see another sunrise. October 14 continued the grim trend. Ukraine reported over 190 engagements in a single day, resulting in another 1,200 Russian soldiers lost. Imagine the destruction: fell tanks, artillery systems, and aerial vehicles littering the landscape, scenes that haunt the living. Moreover, Ukraine's focus on dismantling Russian command centers further undermines any semblance of organized resistance. In a shocking juxtaposition, while Russia boasted about successful strikes, the heavy toll of its own losses compounded the irony. Doesn't it seem absurd? A nation claiming victory while its men are falling at unprecedented rates. As Russia descends further into chaos, could this blind determination lead to a point of no return, a revelation about the futility of their grand strategy? The subsequent days beckon fear and uncertainty. Will Russia continue to gamble with the lives of its soldiers? Or will the truth, hidden amidst the rubble and betrayal, break through the veneer of propaganda? A chilling silence lingers, and the stakes have never been higher.